Hello and welcome, Mirandus community. This is the Mirandus Gentry back at you again. We have a great guest, Mega Raid Boss. We have a hot mic somewhere.
Mirandus Gentry back at you again.
We have a great guest, Mega Raid Boss.
Hello, everyone.
All right, sounds like somebody's hot micing or something on my end. You guys catching that? Okay. So yeah. Anyway, we had some exciting topics to talk about today. But first, I wanted to introduce our guest, Mega Raid Boss, and give him an opportunity to introduce himself. He's a member of the Mirandus community that we've all had a chance to interact with for a long period of time across the various discords, and he always has a lot of great and interesting things to say and comment on. So we wanted to get him out here in front of the community so everybody else could value him as much as we do. Hello, Mega.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. Appreciate that. Appreciate that. Feels great to be here.
Right on, my man. So we got an opportunity during the week to meet on some topics, and the first one we wanted to talk about was how will buildings function and interoperate with each other. Can we get that on the screen? There we go. So yeah, if Mega, if you want to go ahead and hit it off with that, and then everybody else can chime in, and people in the comment section, if you guys have anything to say on that, go ahead and feel free. We'll get you up here too.
All right. So for how buildings will function and operate, my thing is really more so trying to. Of course, we don't have much information, but just trying to understand the nuances between all the various structures or buildings, like how you would have a stand versus a shop. So, say for example, you have like if you have a homestead, you have one farm plot and a small plot. Just as far as okay, I'm thinking if I have a farm plot, but then I want to get into potion making. Would just the fact of me having a potion stand be sufficient in conjunction with the farm plot? Like just the dynamics of how that would work. But either between the two, or say for example, if I wanted to make bread, and I use my farm plot for wheat and barley, but then I want to make bread, like just the dynamic. What if let's say if a person does not even have a bread stand, or if you would need synergy between the different stands to be able to be efficient with them. That's where that comes from. I know we don't have clear information, but it's just those things that float in my mind.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, the way the supply chains will actually work and how things will interact is something we don't know yet. Hopefully, at some point in the near future, we can get Gala to give us some information there.
I think for a lot of the, I guess, perspectives of the things that we don't know, we need to look at what we do know. And right now, we all have Townstar to fall back into, and we know that McCarthy was involved with Townstar. Gala obviously manages Townstar. And if we look at the interaction between those buildings, you can see there's a certain process they follow about how you bring the raw materials into a final product, and also how you upgrade your buildings as well. I wouldn't expect it to be too far off of what we're already seeing. They've kind of got the model. It's successful. It's just putting into a Mirandus, gameplay style that will be the curious thing for me.
So in general, we kind of got enough to just imagine everything. Like all of the buildings they have, we can like artificially like imagine how they'll go together in our head. It's really quite interesting, just how well they did that, like giving us enough to keep us interested, but also like create like a dynamic supply chain in a way with so little.
I think that it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out, because I don't know that all of these questions have been answered. I think there's this thing where we think that hopefully this information is going to be revealed. I think a lot of this is still being fleshed out. And so even on this show, I would encourage all of us to share what we think it should be. Not only what we think it will be, but what we as individuals think that it should be to make for a great gaming experience. And so one of the things that comes to mind for me when I'm looking at not only Mirandus as it's forming, but I think in terms of all metaverses and think of terms of even Ready Player One, which just happens to be what McCarthy mentioned within a post that he created recently on LinkedIn when he in the process of hiring. He says, hey guys, we're creating a Ready Player One experience in a fantasy world. So if that's the case, I would go as far as to take the liberty, at least on my end, to say that interoperability between buildings should be a person has this function, this career path, and therefore if the bread stand is the bread maker, that bread maker should be able to have a functional business to where if that's all the person wanted to do, they could do it and they could actually make a living doing that. They don't have to have 7 different buildings, because the truth is, if this is a simulation that's emulating real life, the bread maker doesn't have 7 different buildings. He just makes bread.
Yeah, I think once you get into the idea of interoperability with the bread example you just gave, is the person going to be sufficient just being a bread maker and a bread seller, or within Mirandus or any play to earn game, are you going to have to own the pipeline as well to be profitable, right? We all want to play and have a good time, but I think most of us here also want to be profitable as well. And does that mean you need to own the whole pipeline, or do you need to just own the bread shop and can you be happy there? Or if we look at it through a scholarship system, like other games, and we provide opportunities for other people to play and earn, do they just need the bread stand, or do we need to provide the whole pipeline for them to actually generate some personal revenue?
Right. So
I think that's, go ahead, Ray.
yeah, just to add on to that. So in our real lives, day to day, if this is a simulation like just mentioned, we don't know the back end of what it takes to make this bread from the bakery. We're not there. We don't have the connections, and we're not maybe partnered with the manufacturer of certain grains to make specific types of breads. But as the consumer, you just go to the bread store, you buy it. So what's going to be happening behind the scenes is some interdependent system between resources and other shop owners. So if that's the case, then the economy should be a thriving one as more players come in. So everyone would be able to play and earn just from coming in, not having any buildings, because they would earn enough from playing to then buy and fund these particular stores, whether you're the owner of the bread stand or the potion shop. And behind the scenes, you as the business owner, right, essentially, you would have to do your due diligence to make sure you're so it should just be, if you have a bread stand, you should be able to survive and make a living within the game to fund and to maybe earn, even if you're not playing. But if the component, like if your time is going to be required to play and earn, then I would think that you're going to have to do the same with these stands. You're still going to have to put time in. But it should be in a way, in my opinion, that you create the bread. There's going to be some interoperability and just like within Townstar, there's going to be many factors at play and variables that depend on each other for you to just be profitable with your building or land deed. So we'll have to see how they actually build it out that way.
I think the interesting thing about getting back on the bread shop thing is that person going to be sufficient just to stand there and wait for somebody to buy a loaf of bread from them? Is there going to be unmaximized time during that time, or are they going to apply that time elsewhere that's productive versus just selling a product that's already been created? But I like the idea of a metaverse that's manifested fully, where people can go to the bread shop, not worry about how it was made, buy what they need, and then move on to whatever they're doing. In this case, adventuring is what you brought up,
right?
Which I think is a great idea. You have the adventure population that has this whole series of businesses sitting behind the scenes that supports their endeavors, just like in the real world. And I think that's fantastic when it's done through the lens of a Mirandus or a space game or something like that.
In the past, when we've looked at some of the images and we can see that there's a person behind the bar, or there is someone that's bringing food to serve to a table. While I sense that those are just complete full mock-ups, the question becomes is like, what does that actually look like if you have a bread stand? If you're an adventurer and you go to a bread stand, are you able to simply walk up there, click, and enter an interface and serve yourself, or does someone actually have to be present? And if someone actually has to be present, what would be interesting, being that, again, you mentioned scholarships as we're looking at other models that are developing in the same space, are you able to perhaps have several people work your bread stand for you so that there is someone present? Or again, is it just an interface that you interact with?
Yeah, I think those are all interesting points. I think it's important to realize that, I mean, being that all these things have real world cost, nobody is going to continue to put forth this kind of cost and effort if they're not making some sort of income off of it. You know, there's got to have to be some kind of profitability. Otherwise, everything will fall apart. And that kind of leads into one of the other topics that MegaRaidBoss gave us, which was the potential for building owners to be priced out of using their buildings, and whether or not they're going to be able to maintain the kind of income necessary to be able to continue to provide their services, as well as be able to expand on those services and possibly move into other lines of business as well.
Yeah, I think the idea that somebody might have to pay more for their plot than they're going to earn in revenue is a real thing that needs to be considered if you're a building owner and you don't have your own deed. Because we already know there's going to be some degree of competition between plots between building owners. But if you've got somebody who's got the prime position, you know, along the whatever supply line, there's, you know, that deed owner is going to price his plots accordingly. And if you're right at the edge of making money there versus paying your deed owner, and we still don't know what that looks like, if it's going to be something monthly or something that's based on sales. But you could be priced out of using your own buildings for that very matter. And then we add the competition on side of it, and then you're really priced out of using your own building because you don't have a deed.
Our good friend from the Farmers Guild there at 1012 had a nice comment. He was saying, I remember hearing something about an NPC to cover your stands, to vendor for you if you're not on. And I think that kind of goes back to what you were kind of mentioning, Jesse. I mean, I think that's going to be necessary in a way. I think there was some talk about allowing people to earn at a certain level if they were doing the thing themselves or if they were hiring somebody else, and making things less efficient if they were using an NPC. So maybe an NPC is going to cost you more than maybe you could pay a person to actually do it for you, and it would still be viable to pay a person, you know, over an NPC or something like that.
NFT NPCs? Are we going to get those now?
Don't give any ideas.
I think we just increased the profit margin for Gala Games.
New revenue driver, right?
There you go. You don't want to do it yourself? You can't rely on someone who's trying to come from the Philippines or a third world country? Buy an NPC. It's programmed to do it for you.
Right.
No hiccup.
It's only 15 Ethereum.
that part.
Yeah.
But you know what the truth is, though? If that wasn't an option, I would much rather actually see the person be able to do that from a developing country for sure.
Oh, yeah,
I think I think that's the future of this in-game economy, no matter which game model we're looking at. So hopefully we factor that in, because I think that's what will keep things moving.
Yeah, and I've been pretty. Go ahead, Bonafide.
I think that's going to be the biggest driver of blockchain gaming, NFT gaming, whatever you want to call it, going into the future. Is we have, you know, probably definitely in the greater millions, if not, you know, a billion people out there that have cell phones and have no other type of technology, you know. But for them making, you know, as we're seeing with some of these other games out there, I mean, for them making $30-40 a day is a huge deal.
It's a big deal.
So,
sure.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I think that's where these games are going. I think that the ones that are able to master that going forward are going to be the most successful games. I mean, I can foresee an MMO that masters the economics properly being in that World of Warcraft position where they're the dominant game for 10-20 years because they were the first mover. Even though they're not better than a lot of the other games out there, they just dominated because they did it very simply, very well, and they were already on top. They just stayed there.
Yeah, I've been pretty vocal privately amongst our group about my uneasiness about the perception of exploitation of these different, you know, populations. But then Jesse, or I think it was Jesse, shared a video that was kind of reflective of what was actually happening in those communities that were doing this gaming, and it really made a change for them. So it kind of changed my perspective on on who's actually doing this. This isn't just like sweatshop labor. These are people who had real stories about how this game actually kept their community afloat. And there's something there that really resonates with me, and it's really, I guess, tempered my perspective on the potential for exploitation. So I love the idea of how can you move money from a richer country into a less rich country in a way that actually doesn't come with all these requirements. If a government gives another government money, there's always some requirements tied to it, or some reason they're going to give them the money, or some kickback. In my opinion, this is a great way to get money without government from one population into another and really lift their quality of life. I'm actually enjoying that idea.
Right quick, that video that Bonjo was talking about, I believe you're talking about that Play to Earn documentary. It's on the YouTube channel Play to Earn, and it's a Play to Earn documentary, NFT gaming in the Philippines. And I mean, it's mind blowing just watching how that can affect people in some of these underdeveloped nations. And like you said, it's all decentralization, open source, freedom of movement, free market. These are the types of things that are going to be very powerful going forward. Where we're getting out of the invention of blockchain has taken us out of this realm where we have gatekeepers and controllers and dictators who decide things for us, and it's getting more on a level where a person, any random person in a country like America can employ a person in the Philippines to play a video game for them, and they can split the profits, and that's a beautiful thing.
I think some of the hesitation had been in the past that it feels like if you are employing someone for, let's say, $20 a day, and that's what they're working for, we have an association with the cost of living that we experience in other parts of the world. So then there's this feeling and sense of, if someone is earning less, is that taking advantage of them? But the truth is, if their cost of living and their lifestyle is completely different, and they can do things like that documentary showed, where they can feed their family, they can take care of themselves. In some case, people buying a home because they have this as an opportunity, then it creates a win-win. And one of the things that really shares that being relevant is the fact that once this opportunity becomes available, you see people flooding to it as an opportunity because it's something immediately available to them that wasn't before. It's something that presents opportunity. So in that regard, I'm all for it.
Right on, Mega. Not to put you on the spot, but did you have anything else you wanted to comment on as far as these buildings interoperability? We had a couple of bullets here.
So say for example, like with the interoperability, like with Town Stars, you play Town Star, you get to a point where you could, you build a refinery, but then if you get better, you then know, okay, I can now also use a power plant. So my thing where that would translate into Mirandus would be, okay, I have a bread stand, but then there's also a grain stand, like to know which, if you would have multiples of certain buildings or like a subset of certain structures, would they give you more benefit? Would it be more efficient to run those? I know we don't have anything official, but those are the things that just come to mind for that. And then just for this current topic too, just the fact of let's say if a person, like I'll say I have a Grand Inn, and then if I literally am not able to pay the lease because, let's say if I'm priced out, then I effectively have a virtual NFT paperweight.
That was just a nice way of saying that. That was funny.
That's interesting, and that raises the question: is like, so lease payments even if you agree to a term, are they paid up front? Do you have to come up with that, or is it a situation where it's like, okay, we agreed on a monthly term, and then like you said, what happens if you don't have that to pay? Does your building just become immediately unaccessible to you? Does the land become available? What actually happens if a building owner breaks contract? I don't know.
Yeah, it seems to me that the best way to go about this is it's a percentage of your sales. I mean, if you're paying a monthly piece and you're not making the money, then you're going to get booted right away. But if you're paying a percentage of the sales, let's say it's 2%, 3%, 4%, then you have some residual income coming in for that plot consistently as the sale is made. But then that puts the the dynamic of the competition, it changes a little bit, right? Because you might have a person with a different type of stable or a different stable that says, I'll give you an additional 1 or 2% off my sales. There's going to be people who are more willing to kind of give a piece of the cut to the property owner in that circumstance. So I think the dynamic between deed owner and building owner is going to be fantastic to watch. I mean, it's going to be something that is definitely a piece of the game that people are going to be considering. The one thing that I thought would be neat about interoperability, and this is going in the direction Jesse shared about what we would like to see, is if buildings had buff effects on other buildings, right? So if you have a stable or a bakery, let's say you have a bakery, and around it you have bakery-related plots or buildings, do those buildings get a buff from the bakery by proximity to each other? I think there's something there that they could do that would really build these little communities of almost like guild sections. You've got your bakery section, your stable section, things like that.
I think they almost have to do something like that, Banjo, and part of it is, from what you were saying, I had this flash in my mind of, just looking at economics in previous games. Say potions become really hot all of a sudden, and the potion market, the value of potions shoots up, or as we've seen, or the value of jewels shoots up all of a sudden. You're going to have, in these buildings competing for these plot subspaces, you're going to have landowners that are going to be like, hey, you know what? Yeah, get out of here, bakery. It's potion. Who has a potion? Who has a potion?
Right.
And so in order to combat that and keep that from happening, keep from whole cities turning into simply potion and you can't get bread anywhere, they're going to have to create some kind of system where it's going to be a positive, where you're going to be incentivized to have a variety of different types of buildings and not lock yourself into one form of commerce in order to be more successful in that area.
Mm-hmm. And that could happen as a deed owner. You could end up drafting up these long-term leases to try and lock people in, and then all of a sudden realize that half of the buildings you have are not what people are after. That's not what the sweet spot of the economy is, and end up in a really challenging situation. But also what Banjo said earlier, I think is really relevant. I think that for me as a deed owner, I would like to approach the revenue share model because that incentivizes both of us to make sure that there's traffic. If I own a deed, I want to make sure that I'm doing some type of external marketing within the kingdom to draw people to my village or my town or hamlet or whatever it is. And that's of benefit to the building owners that are there. And if it's just a matter of rent, what's your incentive?
Yeah. It's interesting because it's not even just, we're talking about interoperability between buildings, but there's also interoperability between deeds, right? So if you think you've got a farming deed that's going to be primarily geared towards growing stuff and producing stuff, probably not in the creation and selling of stuff, how do they place that deed near enough a city or a place that does sell that stuff so they don't have to spend too much money or time getting their product to whatever financial or central hub there is? So there's a whole nother level of interoperability there. That's something that needs to be considered for these large guilds that are going in with the plan to create pipelines.
Yeah.
Right on. Anybody else have any more comments on buildings and such, and the economics thereof? If not, we can move on into exemplars. We have multi-exemplar usability, and is it really possible to get a couple of these at once, or no? Because a couple of these are kind of related.
A couple of the banner posts. No, we just one at a time.
Just one at a time. Okay. Yeah.
So Mega, what were your thoughts on the multi-exemplar usability? I know this is something that picked up in chat over the past couple of days as some new information came out. Where's your head at?
Oh, so where my thoughts are for that is just everyone's overall opinion on, okay, should there be a cap on how many exemplars a person should be able to actually use in Mirandus? Should there be a cap of, let's say, for example, 10 or I don't know, 3 or unlimited? And then if it's an unlimited amount of exemplars a person can use, as far as not just to play but also to rent, what is everyone's kind of like perspective on that? Just the scope of using multiple exemplars?
So I have a thought. If we were able to make multiple wallets within the Gala Games ecosystem, and even though the team or the company itself, they wouldn't necessarily frown upon it. I'm just hypothetically speaking. If you were able to just create another wallet, you can send an NFT exemplar to that wallet, and then give the password and a username to that person who can utilize that while you're playing your Mudsen, for example, doing your thing with your Mudsen, and you can have them resourcing and going into the mines. And similarly, like Axie Infinity, just because they're just ahead of the spaces when it comes to the ingenuity of and the creativity of the community in combination with what they already built out. It was almost like a perfect match of sorts to have invested all this money into these Axies and then just have them there on your account, and you're not able to use them at all for no other reason, not even to you don't want to multi-account anybody, right? So then you'll get banned. But if we're going to be buying all of the dwarves so we can be the most efficient at mining, then I wouldn't see why it would be a big deal, because now you're having more players coming to the game, staying there, staying longer, playing to earn, and it helps the overall economy when you have resources coming and going by supply and demand. So I think that would be, I think that would be great if that was a possibility.
I think there's a couple reasons why we will see multi-exemplars not being a problem. The first of which is that if we look at the history of Gala Games comes from a play-to-win model. If we're looking back towards some of the stuff they've done in the past with Zynga. And so I think the play-to-earn is fairly new for them, and they're kind of trying to get their feet underneath them in this space. And so because of that, I think that the more exemplars you have, the more you'll be able to play. And in addition to that, the second reason is that they've already shared that one of the models that they're going to, kind of welcome is that you can kind of rent out or make use of these. So who's to know and say, because there's a lot of ways you can spoof IPs. So who's to say whether it's you personally using multiple exemplars or if it's that you've leased these out to other people to play. So I think it's as many as you have, you're going to be able to play them, not simultaneously, of course. It's going to have to be either, even if they're in the same wallet or different wallets. And that becomes the question. How does that work? If you're going to let someone else play it, do you have to transfer it to a different wallet? Mm-hmm. But I don't think there's going to be an issue with having multiple exemplars being played.
If I can jump in really quick. I think it was, I can't remember the game, but there was one game where they're saying, they want to set it up where you can rent it. It stays in the owner's wallet, but you can't stake it. You can't use it. You can't put it on the open market. So it just sits in your wallet doing nothing. But there's a smart contract on it so that if someone does want to rent it, they use it through your wallet. But the downside is if you can stake the asset, which is better. Do you want to stake the asset to slowly build some passive income, or do you want to leave it out as a rental and get a little bit more money, but then you're on the market where it's like, is that NFT worth enough for other people to rent it often enough to not stake it? But I can't remember the game. I wish I could remember which one it was. But yeah, that was one way they're trying to get around it, where you keep it in your wallet and it's just a smart contract that allows the person to use it.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've discussed a little bit off the podcast is, how is that going to come into game and come out of game, and how are the skills going to be attached to it? So if I rent out my darks or my elf rather, if I rent out one of my elves, are they going to get just the flat starting point of an elf, or are they going to get all the skills that have been built up with it over time? And then when it comes to selling that elf down the line, are you going to be selling just the skin, so to speak, kind of exemplar as a skin, or are you going to be selling all the skills that go with it? Is the skin or the exemplar attached to the Chronicus, or does it have its own Chronicus? I think those are the questions that we don't know, because I can't see myself renting a level 1 skin, if you will, unless I really, really needed it. I'd want all the perks that go with it. And if I'm going to build a character over 2 or 3 years and I want to sell it, I don't want to sell a level 1. I want to sell what I've worked for 3 years.
Absolutely. Ray actually came up with an interesting point there, kind of mentioning the scholarships, and then in relation to Mirandus, because all this time I've been thinking about, I'm an exemplar owner as well, and I've been thinking about it in terms of me being able to rent my exemplars out to people. But from a scholarship perspective, I think it would actually be more beneficial as far as player adoption and bringing more players into the ecosystem if you could have a scholarship where I could loan my exemplar to somebody and receive a share of the profits that they were receiving on that character. But then that ties into the economics of Mirandus. I mean, are they going to be able to go out and actually earn something that I'm going to find of value? You know.
Yeah, just quickly to piggyback off what you said, I think it would be great if scholars were a thing, whether you transfer your exemplar into another wallet and then give the email, because your private keys would keep that safe in your wallet, that exemplar, but all they would have is the access to the account, which they can play with that exemplar. So besides that, if the scholar eventually earns and plays enough, if there's a quota or whatever you agree for them, they can graduate, quote unquote, graduate from that exemplar, because then they wouldn't need to give a cut to what they've been earning to you or the building owner, and they might all in game buy an exemplar that's the base that they can do this essentially the same type of earning but keep 100% of it. So now you have a player in the Philippines who you helped get their footing to get their own exemplar that's purchasable in game with the in game currency of Mirandus, maybe Gala, but it depends what they decide. But if that was the route, then you would guarantee a retention. The numbers of retention would be great on that line, because now you have these people who graduated from being scholars who weren't able to buy an exemplar, or if right out the gate Gala Games gives a $10, you could always charge people to buy a base, but there should be options there for people, both for the play to earn people coming with nothing, and then also people who purchase exemplars. There could be a middle ground, I think.
You sparked a thought about scholarships, Ray, that I think is worth talking about. Would Axie be, would the I guess the NFTs of Axie be as expensive as they are if there wasn't a scholarship program, right? And I don't think there would be, because I think if you think it through the lens of Mirandus, if a person can still just leave the game but leave their assets there to be staked out or rented out and played with by other people and earn some residual income, that will have a different effect on the market than if people are done with the game and they just sell their NFTs to everybody who wants to buy them. Because now I've got this asset I can leave there as a residual or passively earning asset, or I can try and make my costs back, maybe make some profit on it when I sell it to play another game. So I think scholarships have a huge impact on the actual price of an NFT once the game is live.
Right. So just to touch base with that point, I think they would, because the more utility you have for a specific NFT, whether it's an Axie or an exemplar, then the price will gradually go up. So even if you weren't able to do scholarships, but you can stake it or add it to a liquidity pool and turn it into, if whatever utility and added utility there is, then the price will go up. So in Axie Infinity's case, it's just an exorbitant amount of prices for Axies, but because the current and future utility is going to be one that is, non-existent in other projects that aren't playable yet and still developing. So I think the increase of price would happen, but maybe not as fast as it did with Axie Infinity. If that was,
I think that there's the similarity that I look to there is cost. Like the lowest end of an exemplar is $200 right now, but that's going to change over time. This is the lowest it will ever be. So if all of a sudden we see the lowest price of an exemplar be $650 or something like that, then all of a sudden you have priced a lot of people out of being able to play. So then if you have someone that has the ability to play to earn with an exemplar, but they don't have to buy it, and then you can have the same model where you split kind of the revenue share, that makes sense. But another question that falls in the suit is that I've heard McCarthy say with the mini game that you kick off a craft. So does that mean that you don't have to be present while the crafting is happening? Because then that kind of takes it away. So if you have to be present to do these things, then by all means, it makes sense for you to hire someone or multiple people to be there to work that exemplar to maximize it.
all right. So yeah, I think in the future, after this mini game, which is mobile or desktop, they're going to have to. I think they would have to switch it up, because if you're going to just automate the crafting, that's great for now with the small amount of people that are involved owning deeds and buildings, and how they're going to drip feed everyone coming in from either having a deed, the most expensive one, or the largest, and then downwards to gold members, and then just regular people with no gold, to just start to populate the world on the server. But the prices, like you said, there's no utility for these NFTs as of yet, and the price is going up because they're just doubling the price after the first round is gone. So the price is going up, and people aren't going to be able to play with them anyways for how long. So once there's a foundation where you can stake, or if that happened beforehand of being able to kick off a craft in the beginning, but the potential to earn is elsewhere in other games, then it's almost it's unfortunate, that's the case where there's NFTs, because even with these NFT art projects, whether it's Subducks or this is more a degen conversation, but if you're crypto holders, they have a token for the art piece, and before they added that utility to do liquidity, to provide liquidity, where you could swap your NFT for coins, right? The crypto hodler coin, and then you can buy back a random one from someone else. So there's so much utility just for these art pieces of NFTs, but still nothing for this game that's being developed and the exemplars. So hopefully when the minigame comes out, it just evolves from there, and we have more utility for our exemplars, or anything that we spent so much money on in this early stage.
Yeah, something that you Ray and Banjo were talking about, as far as the like the Axie thing and the floor price of an Axie. You're right that obviously if people were leaving the game, that would increase the supply, and that would drive the prices down. The thing about Axie is that there's so much demand. There's I don't know how many thousands, maybe millions of people who want to play, who can't afford to play it, and that is what's driving the value of those Axies up. And so similarly in Mirandus, having people wanting to come play, that demand of people wanting to get into the game, and having that floor cost of entry could be a successful strategy to them if they had a viable model where a person could come in, use somebody else's exemplar, like a scholarship type of thing, and actually be able to earn something reasonable to where, a lot of people are going to want to do this over playing a different game, which is also available to them.
One of the interesting consequences of this model within Mirandus, though, is going to be interesting. And for those of that have been with us for these 4 episodes, you're hearing now that we're kind of injecting some of the models that we're seeing outside of Mirandus, because that's kind of how this whole space is developing. And so I think that's what's going to happen. There's going to be a hodgepodge of what we see other people do right, other people do wrong. And hopefully as Mirandus develops, it'll look at some of those and take some of those things. But what will be interesting in an MMORPG that we will see for the very first time, if this does become the model, is it will be strange in the sense that you'll say, hey, dude, how you doing? But you're talking to one of who knows how many people, because you don't know who's playing that character. That will be one of the first times we actually experience that consistently. You really won't have the same relationship as you've had in past MMORPGs. And so that's going to be a dramatic change. What do you guys think about that?
I would see.
I think they could change. I think they could have a function where you could name yourself upon logging in, but that also has the potential to be abused. So maybe they would have to link it to an IP address or something like that, to where your name, like kind of like an account profile type of situation, where you have an account profile, but you can use somebody else's exemplar.
So you're using it like a skin.
Right. Like, you're basically able to operate their somebody else's exemplar for the time that you're playing, and then they only have to kind of roll back or whatever. Because, like you say, I mean, there's potential for abuse on both ends of that spectrum. I mean, if you have somebody that can change their name every 5 minutes, then obviously that's going to have a high. Somebody's going to abuse that on day one. That's automatic. Yeah. And if you go the other direction with it, exactly. And if you go the other direction with it, where it's tied to the character themselves, and you're gonna have situations where somebody goes out and earns you a bad reputation on one of your avatars, and now you can't go into a certain city or whatever. You know, so you got both extremes there. I'm sorry, Ultra, you had something?
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, one way. Well, in the smart contract, I could see where you would have the renter. So like, let's say if I rent out an exemplar, I would have in parentheses kind of like one of those the guild signs where you kind of put your name in brackets, but then you can put like rental one, and then the person would have the player's name after it. So it'd be like rental one, Cryptolonius. And so that we know, like, all right, Cryptolonius is playing this character. And then you finish using it, and then it would be like rental one, Ray. And then he just goes out and just starts wrecking everybody's life. But then they could put the mark. On Ray himself. I'm not saying he's gonna do that, but they could put the mark on the wallet or the person's account, so they know it's him using it. But then rental one avatar isn't gonna have a bad mark because it's just avatar. What is he gonna do?
I love that idea, except we got to take that rental name and switch it to scholar or protege or citizen or something.
No, people are gonna know they're renting my avatar. Rental one, rental two.
I think the best way to do that.
Maybe it's by color of the above the icon of the individual. At least that way, because there's a lot of people that are pretty serious about staying in role in character and just going around, meeting up with people that, hey, rental one, how you doing?
If you have a guild and you put a rental before the name as a prefix, then I don't think it would sit well because they want to be able to have some type of identity in game other than Mr. Rental, Jonathan.
Not only the brand risk for Gala calling characters rentals. I don't think that's going to go over well.
Oh
But-
my God,
I don't think Jesse Hines will agree to that one.
Well, I think there was already the word peasants or poor people thrown around and how coins would be thrown at them. So I wouldn't put it past them. That's just
Yeah.
But I do want to mention. Oh, sorry, Bonfire. Go.
No, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to shout out. If it might be Punjab, but under the Farmers Guild, a YouTube channel that he runs, he mentioned how you're going to need these exemplars to craft while you play the game, whether it's the kickoff of a craft in the beginning or late when the whole game comes out. So if something could take 4 hours to 4 days to craft, then you can log into another avatar. So I think that might be the foundation of what we're able to do. I don't think scholars are going to be the thing right out the gate. I think what they're going to maybe build is something of the sort where you have crafting that takes a while, and then you can just log in with another one and no rental, and we'll see if that starts it off. But jumping out of the gate with scholars and allowing all these people to do that, I don't think it would be that much of a difficult thing to accomplish. But just for the comment right above by KNat, shout out to KNat. If you're letting someone use an exemplar, there should be a setting that they can't go into dungeons or area battles where they can lose your NFT. So I would think that this is going to be up to the individual via smart contracts, where as you can make or create quests in the game, this would be a stipulation of like, okay, this is what you're able to do and not do with my NFT that I invested in. Thank you very much. And then you can go out there and do your thing.
What if they can be confined to even the building or even the village that they're in?
Right.
That would be interesting.
Like permission.
Yeah.
for a
Confining them
district.
to the town. Yeah, confining them to the town sounds safer than the building. The building seems kind of.
I could already see all these crafters like, hey guys, we're gonna right before we fight the miniature king, let me start these crafts off, and then someone Leroy Jenkins in, and then half the team is missing because they're all starting to craft.
Where's the whole squad?
One of the things that
right there. Sorry, you got something?
Yeah, I was going to say one of the things that we didn't discuss in comparison of games is we know that in order for a broad community to get into it, it has to be easy, it has to be quick, it has to be understandable, it has to show the results quickly, right? So we know that Axie is battles. They fight, they win or lose, they move on to the next battle. They fight, they win or lose, they move on to the next battle. So there's going to be some instant gratification there. But if you're hiring somebody to farm or to harvest wood, what's the instant gratification they're going to get so they know that their time is being put to use and they're going to get paid well? So I think there's something to the scholarship idea that has to translate differently into an MMO than it would for something like Axie that's quick on a phone. Whatever they do, if it's going to be successful, it needs to be quick and accessible, right? It can't be something where they need these high-end machines to actually interplay with the game.
That's a perfect segue to this LTO comment, 1037. And that's a.
Sorry, Bonafide, I just had one one more thing to say on the topic of multi-exemplar usability. So iGuard made an interesting comment as well. I'm just in the comment section real quick. If there's free-to-play gamers who play with a rented exemplar and it upgrades, so you level up this exemplar the longer you play with it, essentially, could there could be a way to let them really play for free, no rent tax, so or own property. So with Axie Infinity, if you were to transfer your Axies to another account, the level of that Axie goes to 0. So the purpose, I would think, with these exemplars, if it's at a 0 level and you have a person renting it out, right, or being a scholar under you, then they can level up. And my only concern is that the time invested in that character would go to 0 once they graduate, for lack of better words, and then are able to have their own that they couldn't purchase from the price that Gala might be offering it in US dollars or in crypto of whatever crypto it is. So, I'm sure that Gala Games is going to allow us to buy a $10, NFT to start off with, and you're going to have basic armor or through the sanctuary. But if somebody's really having the time and could make more money by being a scholar, they're going to end up hooking up with a guild because their earning potential is greater because there's an ecosystem with these guilds. But if you're just going to pay $10 to get in, then your earning potential is going to be less because now you have to network, you have to get involved. And although the exemplar of the scholar you have is going to go to 0, you already have relationships and you could stay within that guild and take advantage of the systems that and the procedures that were built for you to eventually level up that new character that you have with great armor, with great swords, because there's a forge and there's food that you can eat. It's not like you're going to be on your own now and then, be out there with just now your news level 0. You're going to be within communities within Gala Games, ideally. But if you're just going to be a lone wolf and you have a deed, and you're just going to swap through your own and you're not going to be wanting to build relationships, then you're going to be having all your exemplars with your own deed and just log in and log out if they only allow us to start a craft and kick it off if it's going to take 4 hours or more and you're going to just be grinding it out by yourself. So I don't know, it's interesting. We'll have to see how it all plays out.
Yeah, that was good, Ray. So you talked about graduating there and how losing XP when you transfer the NFT over. So one way of graduating perhaps could be the person saving enough in-game to actually buy it off the guy.
That too.
And they just get the keys to the NFT becomes theirs. They don't have to move anywhere and it retains the levels that they've worked up.
Right. Also, they can just they can graduate with the weapon, armor, and boots, and whatever gems and rings and necklaces.
Yeah,
and
everything they've earned while playing.
So now they're level 0, but they could still defeat a goblin who could be level 3 maybe right out the gate and earn more XP than just if it was at a 0 goblin, and then you're dying 50 times and winning 3 times, for a stun or whatever, however the mechanics work. So, I think
depending on the price, it could be interesting if, say, you did that and someone was able to get something very rare and graduate within a day.
Right. Yeah.
Just buying it straight off you. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, a floating thought that came to mind is, say, for example, if someone wanted to be one of the best forgers, and they said, okay, my strategy is I could have multiple glimmering. Is that the glimmering clan?
Yep.
Where they could say, okay, I'm going to have let's say 2, maybe 2 to 4. And just a scenario, they'd have 2 to 4, but they would be able to rent those out to individuals to essentially say, okay, you all will assist me with mining, let's say specific mining for different ore materials. So that would help a person who wants to forge, weapons and things of that nature, a way to have other players be able to use the exemplars that they rent to them, or if they wanted to, give them a scholarship. Just a different dynamic that came to mind.
Let me get LTO's comment at 10:37 up before it gets too far off. That idea of many scholarship players only have mobile devices. Mobile app tasks may be their best opportunities. And just going back to the mobile game and multi-exemplar usability, it kind of ties in that obviously the demand for the game is going to be based off of accessibility and what people are going to be able to do in that mini game. as far as being able to be a person that can use an exemplar and it be of value to the owner, just using their mobile phone. That'll drive a lot more demand and a lot more people into the game. If say they're part of the mobile game, maybe they can go out and chop trees. Maybe they can go out and do a little bit of mining. Maybe they can manage the crops in a field. You know, and going back to something you were saying, Banjo. These guys. That's one thing about Gala Games is they have a lot of experience in making something that I would think of as kind of drab be very exciting to certain people. I mean, they came out with Farmville, and I knew a lot of people who played Farmville and loved it and got a whole lot of enjoyment off of the little gold or the little chimes and the sounds and all that they were getting, all that little bit of feedback that they get. They enjoyed that quite a bit. I never really played those, but I saw people that, were completely addicted to them.
Well, it seems to me, they've got Mirandus coming out with some sort of mobile type of app to get into crafting, or at least browser-based. They haven't really defined it yet. We've got other games that we know of that are coming out with some mini games that allow people to understand the systems, and I think they're going to get feedback quickly on how is that going to apply to this scholarship type community. I think there's a pretty common agreement that there's got to be some sort of scholarship program if you want to meet the vision or the goals of these supporting these less fortunate countries, right? People in different countries. But what's interesting is they're going to want to see the path to financial, I guess, benefit right away, right? And if it can't be shown right away, they're going to go to wherever it is. So if it stays at Axie, whatever game company does this is going to have a hard time getting people away from Axie because it's a proven system. It's quick. They're making their money. They know how to play it. They're probably getting really skilled at it. So whatever game tries to pull that population away is either going to have to create a new market outside of the Philippines where it's really big, or they're going to have to create a more compelling model. And if they don't build that model right up front, they're not going to get the traction down the line.
Well, the beauty of that, Banjo, is timing, right? So, like right now, there is so much interest for Axie, and there's not enough Axies to go around. So right now, the time is right for any other company to jump in and say, hey, well, you can come play this game. And yeah, you're not going to maybe make as much right away because we're still working on it, but you're going to make something over here and bring people in who are waiting to get into something else and possibly create a system that, use that to iterate and create a system that's even better, because I think that Mirandus has the opportunity to be far more engaging from a role-playing aspect and an RPG aspect than a lot of other things that are on the table right now if they do it right.
Yeah, one thing people talk about when they talk about scholarships is people from like third world countries. They never talk about how you can buy an exemplar for your little brother or cousin, so they can just start earning a little something on the side. Well, when it gets to a certain point, it gets a bit unethical. But
my daughter and I were negotiating rates last night. We agreed at 50-50. She wouldn't accept anything less.
As we're starting to talk about the landscape of all of these games, there's a couple of things that come up for me. Right now, Axie keeps popping up because it's demanding the attention, because it's actually meeting the needs, not the needs of everyone, but it's actually showing up and delivering in a way that I think the market as a whole said, hey, we've been looking for something that meets some of the needs, and it's doing that. But then we have others, like for example, even Star Atlas, where you hear them talking about, we are looking at a 10 to 15 year plan. This whole landscape of play to earn and these metaverses and these models of play where people can actually make that their profession is a big deal. And so one of the things that I think of when I think of Mirandus, if they were to really do it right, and we've talked about this before briefly, there's a lot of different ways to approach this world. I almost think that the people that own the NFTs, the big ones, the buildings and the deeds, the avatar is a little bit different, but the buildings and the deeds, those almost need to feel NPC-ish to other people that decide to play the game for free, the free-to-play model. And then the people that want to micro pay to play. and then the people that actually want to earn, but they can't afford to buy NFTs for it. So this is an opportunity for Gala and other companies looking at the space to see how it's developing and evolving, because that's what it's doing. And there's going to be a lot of stumbling blocks, and some will get it right as we go and say, look what they're doing. Let's incorporate that. And I've heard this mentioned here before on this podcast about how incentives for giving to play. When you gamify an experience, even if it's a person that is going to rent your avatar, even if they're just baking bread, if that person gets a chime that says you just became bread level maker whatever, and now you got a reward for your effort. It wasn't that you're just grinding away. You have to figure out some type of reward system for the experience, no matter what angle they're approaching the game from. As an NFT owner that's got a deed, a person that's free to play, and a person that's looking to make just the grind out on a daily basis for a rental avatar. There needs to be some gamification reward system that makes them feel like their effort was worthwhile.
You bring up an interesting point, Jesse, and I think, will there be a day where people who are shopping for people to give scholarships to based on their capability that they've already demonstrated? So you've got this guy, maybe he's in the Philippines, somewhere else. He's a championship player, right? He aces his games, he kicks ass. Is he going to be competitive and be able to ask for more within the scholarship program? Like, I'm going to make you more money, you're going to pay me more. And I think there's a whole interplay there that we haven't seen, or at least I haven't seen yet, where some of these championship players are going to be able to create their own demand and own market.
Yep.
Yeah,
I believe that. Sure.
I mean, currently, people, from what I've seen out there, people are offering percentages. So, the market right now is set up to where somebody's getting 50% of the income or whatever. And yeah, but like you say, I mean, that's something that they could come in and prove. Like, hey, man, I'm way more valuable than these other 50% guys. I need 60. You know what I mean? or something like that.
Yeah.
Or, you also have the opportunity for some of the things I've been looking at is, you have people that, are able to, that are, like you said, really good. And maybe they're able to like train other people or build teams of people. So like in different MMOs, I've been a part of PvP teams and things like that where, there were certain guys that could take your team to the top and hold the top all day long. You know what I mean? And those guys were extremely valuable. People were, on lists fighting to try to get into those groups because they know once it started rolling in the morning, it was going to roll all day. And, those kind of people will definitely be able to demand a little bit more, in society and in the games,
Well, and the unfortunate thing, as I look into the future, right now it seems like the average person can invest a few $1,000s, start a scholarship program, start building some residual and support somebody who's playing the game. But if I look into the future and we start to look at the high stakes of this, gaming industry, I think we're going to see corporations buying up the most expensive properties or NFTs and building a business line out of people playing that game. So not only did they create the game, but there might be other companies who are fully invested in just buying properties and pushing them out for people to sell. And I think the challenge there is we get back into the idea of, is this decentralized and everybody gets a shot at the action, or are only the richest companies going to be able to pick the best NFTs and draw the best players to play their NFTs to build a profit?
That's why I think whoever comes up with this open source kind of DAO system is going to kill it, because you're absolutely right. I mean, God forbid we end up in a world that is exactly like Ready Player One, where the corporations run everything. I mean, I think every gamer out there, if you ask them, they'd be much happier and feel much more comfortable with other players running everything. I am a gamer. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think most people would, right? Because once you're up against somebody who's got millions of dollars invested or investing to win, so to speak, in the play to earn game, there's gonna be levels of success, right? You're gonna meet walls. You're not gonna be able to compete with a corporation that can front 10 million for the best NFTs and draw the best players to play those NFTs on their behalf. And again, we're looking at companies that aren't invested in the game at all. They just want the money from the people who are playing it. So they probably don't care about how you show up in the game. There's going to be companies and I guess whale investors who are going to just want the profit. and how is that going to degrade the quality or the experience in the game for everybody else?
There's that side, and there's also the corporations that will hire the ringers and the ones that show up that are able to do the best. And even if it's not for the money, they want them to wear branded materials within the game for brand awareness. It's going to be interesting to see how corporations approach this.
Yeah, it's a whole new marketing avenue. Go ahead.
Yeah. Looks like, I was just going to say your wizard looks like a NASCAR all of a sudden, right?
Right.
Well, look at the competitive gaming league. That's already happening, right? They all have the team jerseys with the sponsorships patches on their jerseys, or they have their sponsorships on their YouTube channels. There's no doubt that we're going into an area where marketing hasn't even touched yet. How does marketing show up in Mirandus? We know the Citadels are kind of marketing arms of the different people who have bought them. Are there going to be, Polyant or I forget who bought the other one, but is there going to be flair branding within Mirandus? And is it going to be overt or is it going to be subtle? And that's just Mirandus. If we think about other IPs like space IPs, there's more of a natural leap from maybe Earth branding into something like a space IP.
Right.
I think shout out to all the gamers out there. I think right now is going to be a crucial moment when these games start coming out and we start seeing these advertisements. I think it's going to be up to the community to push back on that really hard if that's not something that you want to see take over your entire screen at some point, which is how the corporations are going to roll. They're not going to stop because if it's working, they're going to keep doing it, and they're going to do it better and worse.
What's interesting, what you just said there, is that one of the places corporations have not been able to take over, example of a social media platform, is Reddit. In fact, if you show up there and try and be commercial, you will get smacked around in a big way. So maybe that becomes a thing in these metaverses. It's kind of like, people discourage corporations from coming in because that's not the experience they want.
Right.
But if the corporations are smart enough and figure out some way, like, come to our Citadel, we're giving out free swords, we're all in trouble.
Yeah. It's interesting that Gala's moving on to Reddit. I didn't even realize they weren't on Reddit, but if anyone's ever been on Reddit in the gaming community, it's one of the most toxic communities out there.
Absolutely.
I haven't seen a launch on Reddit that hasn't been just people screaming and crying. So they're in for they're going to need their big boy britches on when they launch a game, because they're going to get hammered on Reddit. It's just the ecosystem, the way it works out. I've never seen like I said, a non-toxic gaming community there.
And
I love Reddit.
Good night, everybody.
No game launches smoothly either, right? Like every game launches, it always has problems. And you're absolutely right. The firestorm is always on Reddit, man. That's where it goes down. That and the YouTubers as well. The YouTubers will take you to task also, drag you over the coals real good if your game launches smoothly.
If you look at how Gala runs its Discord, which they have a reason to run it that way for new customers, they want to keep it pretty sterile. Reddit doesn't, they give 0 Fs, right? They're going to show up and tell you what they think, and it's going to be a full-time moderator trying to keep that stuff at bay on Reddit. It's just the way it is.
Good luck with that. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go with number 8, Jesse. For the free avatar, should anyone be able to be a dwarf, orc, halfling, and elf, or should there be a gate to that? Let's go on ahead and duke it out. Let's get everybody's opinions on this one. I know we're going to have some nice variances in here, I'm pretty sure. So let's duke this one out. So should everyone be able to have access to, say, an elf, or maybe only access to a dwarf, or should you have to pay for everything?
They should be skinny, bald humans that are 5 feet tall. That's what everyone else gets.
I personally think goblins, just noticeably small and free to play ish. That's what I want.
Here's my prediction on the world. My prediction is that, and this is based on here's the thing. Mirandus to this point is basically McCarthy's opus. It's what he's wanted to build his whole career in gaming, and so it's what he has in his mind. And so all we can do is look to clues of what we think he wants. And what he's expressed thus far is that in the world of Mirandus, magic and magical creatures and things are rare. And that I think that these exemplar, especially on the elves, not to say for the dwarves, the orcs, and the halflings, but probably so, that these may be the only we will ever see. And by the way, it's not a small amount. There's 50,000 of these Well, the humans make up a big portion. But as I understand it, and what I think what we will see is we will see mostly humans for the free to play. Maybe they'll throw in a handful of dwarves. Maybe they'll throw in a handful of orcs. But halflings, I don't think we're going to see any more of. And elves, I don't think we will see any more of other than these exemplars.
I mean, if you look at the fantasy genre, if you will, those populations are always the smaller populations anyway behind humans. Dwarves also, I would say, falls either way into big, depending on the time frame of the genre, or very little. I think that you're right, Jesse. I think there's going to be a metered number of these races. Elf, I could definitely see being exemplar only. Halfling, yes. The other ones, I'm not so sure. It really seems like they're gearing certain races for certain roles. Like, I haven't seen an orc yet that wasn't some type of tank, right? It's a tank every which way with the way they're building them out. And the humans seem to be craftsmen overall, the way we're seeing it. And the elves seem to be the magic part, which goes to what you're saying around Mike McCarthy wanting only magic to be very rare. I have my own issues with that because I love a magical realm, right? I love different races to have magic. I don't want to rely on, enchanted jewelry or potions. I want to be able to see the magic come from our fingers and our hands and whatever, weapon we're holding. So hopefully it's not as rare as it's being led to sound right now, because I want magic. I want to be able to use it. I want to embrace it. And I want to wrap myself around it, right? Or have it wrap itself around me, rather.
Yeah. I think orcs should be as common as humans, actually. I think they should be, anyway.
I think it would be very boring if you walked through a town and none of the exemplar holders happened to be in that town, and so all you saw were humans. I think that would be very, very boring. I think there should be some level of dwarves and orcs running around on the cheap. Now, I also agree that I'm fine with, you might go a month or two without ever seeing an elf. I'm fine with that, and we can do the same thing with the halflings. But as far as the orcs, there's got to be a little bit of variety there. What do you think, Mega? I haven't heard from you on that.
In my opinion, I feel majority should be, mainly humans, of course, and then some type of option for dwarfs and orcs, and then, in my opinion, leave out the halflings and elves.
Yeah, it looks like the comments are kind of agreeing with us here. Where you at on this, Fancy? I know you're a big time dwarf lover. Should the dwarves be rare, or should the dwarves be like commonplace?
So I'm torn a bit on all of them, having like a normal tier, non-exemplar. Like I think I'd be fine with like a normal elf price that I'm not sure about price, but like within grasp, and maybe only like a couple thousand of them. But if they're gonna make like these subdivisions of races, they need to be aesthetically noticeable, just like how we talked about a guild should be last time, like from a distance. I'm not sure if there's going to be like a nameplate like we discussed earlier, but I would like a game where you can tell everything about a person from their character, like they pretty much described in a few of their AMAs now.
Yeah.
Here's something that hasn't been mentioned. Is what if they decided to bring in half elf, half orc, because this is something that's a very active part of traditional D&D.
True.
And we know they like. Go ahead, Bonafide.
Well, I was just gonna say, go ahead and pop Farmers Guild 1107 again with a good one. The 5 races to start. That's always been what they've said. So we can always have new races coming out in the future. Not to step on you, Banjo. You can come on right back in here, but that's also a possibility. Talking about what Jesse's saying as far as these halves and what Fancy was saying earlier as far as the goblins and whatnot.
Can we breed NFTs? That might make an interesting thing, right? And what would that process look like?
If I
You hire a cabin room.
I got a customer for life with me because I'm all about breeding in games.
Well, the other thing to consider is when we have these races and they have limited populations, how does that show up in the world, right? Is there an area where that's identifiably elf or identifiably halfling, and do we have NPCs of some sort that live there? Because a game doesn't really have a lore and a culture if it's homogenized, right? If the whole place looks like humans in town, and everything looks human everywhere you go, it kind of takes away from it. So there needs to be something that's identifiably orc, dwarf, halfling, elf, to kind of draw into the lore of the game.
Now let me ask you, Banjo, do you think that needs to be at launch, or do you think those are opportunities for expansions? Because when I hear you talk about that, I hear expansion number 1, maybe we go into the caves and we start interacting with the dwarves more, and then expansion 2, maybe we go into the orc areas, and and we just that builds out the world dynamically as people are playing it. What do you think?
Yeah, I actually think that would be a bad idea. I could totally see somebody doing it, because that sounds like any other game that we've seen. They introduce a new race and a new area. But the idea that we're going to jump into a world that's kumbaya between all the races right off the bat, that just doesn't seem right to me. There's always, just looking at human nature, there's always interpersonal conflict and struggle between different populations. And then if you add different races into that, there's going to be cultural differences that would drive some sort of tension or animosity. I can't stomach walking through every town and it's just everyone loves each other. That just doesn't give me the same feel I need from an MMO.
If they couldn't start that way, at least it should be in the lore. And one of the things that and you probably experienced this too, whether it's in EverQuest or many of the other ones, where when you go to and visit a city or a land that is all about those people, it changes the dynamics of the experience, and it's a really cool thing. So hopefully some of that's injected in for sure.
It has to be. I mean, and it allows artists within the creative space of the game to actually flex their muscle too, right? If you've got, it's whatever the Game of Thrones land is from top to bottom, where it all looks the same on that one land, it's going to look boring. And I think from an artist's perspective, it's not going to be able to really allow them to be who they are artistically as well.
Personally, I've always been a fan of that schism that tends to go between the elves and the dwarves in most stories, where they kind of, there's that animosity there, a little bit of anger, a bit of beef because of the past or whatever. I kind of have always enjoyed that. Usually orcs are pretty much against everybody else as well in most storylines as well. So
yeah,
one thing that would be cool is
Fancy.
How they mentioned you could get a Pacific skill if you slayed the Minotaur King. What would also be cool if you could get a unique race, so there was only one Minotaur in the entirety of Mirandus.
Yeah, we talked about that on the Discord. If you had the sale in each kingdom, maybe or maybe within the game entirely, you sell 1,000 NBT or NFTs that are a certain race, right, exemplar race, and the idea within the game is for them to take each other out until there's only 10 left. And that's a super powerful extinct race or almost extinct race. I think there's something there to drive revenue, right? We've got this new NFT that they can sell for 22 ETH a piece. And they can then put them at competition and maybe burn those NFTs until we get down to a set number. I think that would be a great dynamic within a game.
Yeah, spawn them all in different parts of the world, and it's like a big Hunger Games. When you see an orc, awesome. You'd follow them around, and people would be live streaming it.
Highlander, totally.
I love
artificial.
I would definitely buy one.
I would too. Not for 15 ETH, but I'd spend $100 on it for sure.
Absolutely not for.
If the winners got a part of the NFT sale as well, that would work.
Oh yeah, percentage of the sales. I mean, that's how you draw in the PvP crowd, right? And we've already had some conversations around PvP, and I think that in order for it to be successful and really be a huge ecosystem or a metaverse, if you will, that draws in a bunch of people, they're going to have to find a way to have some sort of PvP that doesn't live in a coliseum.
Imagine if every town could have one of them, and you designate a person, and you will put money in towards it. And then they represent the town, and then they just have to go off, find the next guy.
I would think it'd be amazing to see Mirandus incorporate some of the things, some of the other games, like even Star Atlas is looking at that with their zones. You stay within this realm, this part of the kingdom, then you are safe. You expand out to this further region, then you could lose everything you have, but your NFT, your avatar, doesn't get burned. But if you extend out to this further region, you might be able to find more riches, but you could die permanently.
Yeah, I love that level of risk. I think that's great. I wouldn't put my my elf out there but I might take a couple free avatars out there and try and do some crazy stuff. I
really
love the idea of yeah, run fast. I just love the idea of losing your assets. Not that even though I wouldn't want to play that game, I love the idea of somebody doing it so I can watch.
Right.
I was going to say that they could easily implement something like that with the Citadel system, right? So, maybe you're safe if you're in the regions controlled by your Citadel, but when you go into enemy Citadel territory, just like in WoW back in the day, when you were on the Alliance side, you were all good. But once you started getting those middle grounds between the Horde and the Alliance, man, it was on site,
What do we got for other questions?
So, we got world-renowned games, Jesse, now to number 10. World-renowned games have player bases over 100 million. Will Mirandus be able to handle this and more long-term?
Mega, what are your thoughts?
Well, that's a big thing there because, like say for example, I come from the genre of playing League of Legends. I know that's one of the, big games out there. But now that I'm aware of Mirandus, I pretty much have my sights and focus on Mirandus now. But the thing is, we have seen, and I don't have the exact numbers, but say for example with Axie, there's the issue with the DDoSing, and I think the player base was around half a million players, give or take. But then with Mirandus down the line, if it becomes, when it becomes a or if it becomes a massive success, the game has to be stable to be able to retrofit, 50, 100 million players. And if, who knows, the skies could be the limit, potential, even higher than that. And then also, if the game scales to that level of player base, how would that work with the dynamics of the game already? Just the way the game functions too, where nothing breaks. Yeah, where the game just doesn't break.
The big challenge with that, as we go into this new realm of technology to have a fluid ecosystem, it's going to demand a single server, a single shard. And that's the crazy part of the new technology. In the past, you've been able to have multiple servers, multiple shards on MMORPGs and other games in the open space genre. You can't have that here. And the truth is, I don't even think Mirandus and Gala Games has that answer yet based on who they're hiring. And they're basically looking for people to say, how do we do this? How do we build this single server environment with the least amount of lag to be able to put in the most amount of people? But at the same time, with the way that technology is evolving, it's kind of like you have to start here, but you have to figure out some type of roadmap that is going to leverage future technology to allow you to continue to expand. This is a new territory, a new frontier. And the truth is, I don't think a lot of the game developers have a full understanding of how they're going to do it, just the direction they're leaning towards.
Yeah, you touched on a great point there. One thing is how they are going to be able to implement that in a way. I've lost the thought. Go on, Banjo. Sorry.
No, I think same track is really what's the tech going to look like. We know these are blockchain games. We know a lot of this is going to live in a decentralized network. Is 30 to 50,000 servers enough for Gala? Is that enough for Mirandus? Is it enough for the entire ecosystem they're building? I think it's going to depend on their team's ability to kind of incorporate. And we know that a number of these play-to-earn games, not just Gala, are kind of building on the fly. And they're building as they go and trying to solve problems as they get there. So hopefully Gala has that in mind. How are we going to get this single shard game? If we look at the high numbers of WoW and the high numbers of EverQuest and other MMOs, we never saw 100 million in a game at one time. But we are going to see, if we have a one shard system, a very populated land. And if they don't make Mirandus big enough to account for the future state of their population, we could get a very congested game where you're stepping over people all the time, and it kind of loses that ability to get out into the wild and explore and not run over 10 other groups trying to get the same thing.
It's not just it's not just what they're building. And sorry, I didn't mean to step on you there, Modified.
Okay.
It's not just what they're building as a platform. It's also the technology they're working with. How many transactions can Flare handle? Just like, Solano right now is what, like 50,000 a second. And that's kind of what, Star S is going to have to deal with. So they're also having to choose the technology because you don't want to have interaction stalled because transactions take 2 to 3 seconds for something to go through.
Yeah, you guys both made an interesting point there. I think once again, shout out to the Gala Games team for doing a great job. I don't think we all mentioned enough the fact that all these guys out here are building the plane as it's flying, right? And
Pioneers.
This is something that's never been done before, and it's something that is going to be huge. And to the victors go the glory, as it were. And it's if you mess it up, you mess it up. It's going to be it's exciting time. But shout out to the teams that were brave enough to step out there and try to get something done.
And I think the challenge for building in flight, if you will, is the how, right? If you're a game company trying to build on top of a blockchain, you might have a lot of different problems than a company that's a blockchain company, or their brain started there and then started building a game on top of it, because intuitively they understand the tech and how the contracts fit in and how maybe to work the economy through the nature of smart contracts and blockchain. Where I think if you've got like Gala brings over like Farmville, right? We've got a successful game like Farmville, and we're going to fit that into a blockchain. It's a different process than the other company, right? So I think there's going to be problems for both as they go in the development process, but I think the blockchain company's first model is going to be a little bit further along. And we're already seeing that in the market, right? The people who are blockchain companies and building games, they are a little bit farther ahead than what we might be seeing from something like Mirandus.
Yeah, I think that was something we were talking about in private, Banjo, that at first, when I first saw Gala Games, I was thinking, oh wow, okay, we got an actual game studio, so they're going to be ahead of all these guys trying to create blockchain games because they actually know how to create good games. And it's like, wait a minute, it's not so much that they're ahead, they're just coming from a different perspective, because the blockchain guys are coming at it like, okay, economics on point, blockchain on point, how do we make a good game? And Gala Games is coming at it like, okay, we can make good games at the drop of a hat. We do that, but how do we make it economically feasible and economically attractive, and how do we integrate this into a blockchain properly? And I think that both sides are trying to reach that middle ground. And may the best man win, may the best team win. That's really what it's going to come down to at the end of the day, is who creates a product that is accessible and attractive and does it first, and then who does it second, and that's how it's all going to lay out at the end of the day.
You make a really interesting point that I never even thought about till you brought this up. So we're over the past few years, even in education and other industries, we've seen the significance of gamifying the experience. Well, even if we look at Axie really, they have an economy that works, and they gamified it. It's Absolutely. Like they figured out a way to put a game on top of it. So it's actually easier, it seems, for companies that are building environments on blockchain with an economy to bring the gaming experience on top than it is for the gaming company to build the infrastructure below it of blockchain and in the economy to fit.
Yeah, I got to push back just slightly. I got to push back because I feel like it's definitely easier, but I feel like the end product that Gala will be able to produce, if they get the economics and blockchain together, will be far superior to, like you say, with Axie. Axie is basically lipstick on a blockchain model, on an economics model. Is what it is, and I'm in it. I'm in Axie deep right now.
Right.
But
that's the truth of it. Yeah.
But that's the truth of it. I'm a realist at the end of the day, and I think that Gala, when they put the makeup on, they're makeup artists at the end of the day. They're not coming at this on the cheap. And so if they can get the economics together, I think they're going to be killing it. Go ahead, Banjo.
Yeah, I think the Bitbender has said in the past that they want to make the blockchain piece invisible, right? Behind it all, when you play the game, you should be able to play the game, get the assets, make the money, and you shouldn't have to worry about the blockchain piece. And I think the implication when they say that is that blockchain companies making a game won't be able to do that. And I think that's a short-sighted perspective, right? I think really any game, whether you're a blockchain first or a gaming company first, can make a system where the blockchain piece is relatively invisible to the player. So I don't use that as a litmus test of who's going to be more successful. I think you're onto something bona fide, though. We do know that Gala has a track record with their leadership team of developing good games, right? So we have to assume positive intent that they're going to make a good game. I think, like we've shared before, the frustration is they're not sharing the build and flight process, right? And it doesn't seem like they're getting the community involved too much. Although their new VP of growth does seem to be asking more questions about what the community is looking for, and specifically the blockchain part of the community.
Yeah, absolutely. Shout out to their new VP of what was her title?
Just Jane, VP of growth. Just Jane on Discord.
Yeah, shout out to Just Jane. That I've personally felt a lot more like we're being heard since she stepped in than I was before. And so, shout out to her. Keep doing what you're doing, and hopefully we all, see some great things happening with Gala in the future.
And open invitation. Join us here. We'd love to have a conversation.
Please.
Oh yeah,
Any Gala
to all. So, yeah, any Gala people, you guys are more than welcome. We'll even put the gloves on and be nice, So come on here. We're nice people.
What do we got for another question?
All right, so let's go to let's roll up to LTO back at 11:14. Jesse, he had an interesting point when we were talking about the Minotaur, and I didn't want that to get passed off. LTO, aka the Uncle. Mike McCarthy talked about only one Minotaur king, but wouldn't a new king take his place? And that kind of goes back to I know Mike McCarthy seems like he's the type to where there's not going to be a new Minotaur king now, but what is gonna take the place of these mega bosses and whatnot when they get taken out? How is that going to roll out, and what do we think the storyline is going to be as far as stuff like that? I mean, we haven't actually heard a whole lot from him on that sort of thing, but it's an interesting topic. What did you think about that, Mega?
Well, for me, it's one of those things where I don't have I'll say a solid answer, but it's just interesting because there'll be, for example, guilds. So say if you have a guild party and you collectively group up to defeat the Minotaur King, but then I remember Mike McCarthy saying something like if it dropped the sword. But then I'm thinking, okay, if the sword specifically is an NFT weapon, how would that work if you're in a guild where I don't think you'd be able to split the sword? So that's just one of those things. Yeah, it's just a something that I'm wondering how that dynamic would work if the drop is for a single item versus, let's say, for example, the in-game currency.
Yeah, I think you introduce a whole new dynamic when you start talking about real finances, right? Because I mean, in World of Warcraft, for instance, you would have legendary weapons that were an entire guild gave their life basically to get that weapon built. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And that caused a lot of drama at certain points. I remember there being issues with people, disappearing and having those kind of weapons. And usually they would be the guild leader or something like that. But I remember there being some drama attached to those kind of situations and scenarios. And it would be nice to not see that come into the NFT gaming space. I mean, we kind of got away from that over time. Like that was an old model from WoW that kind of died. And I think because of that, so I'd like to not see that resurface,
Yeah,
Contracts will change that. I'm sorry,
Yeah,
go
they
ahead, Ray.
could.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a point on the Minotaur King. If that guild or one individual made it that far, because it's such an achievement, and it would have been the most difficult task to achieve from what McCarthy was saying with these particular map bosses that you're going to have to grind out and just build and potentially work with a group of people. But if the sword was acquired by the last strike that killed the Minotaur King, for example, you're rewarded. And then if you're in a guild, there would be a specific trait or buff that would be distributed to everyone within the same guild. They wouldn't be able to use the sword because they weren't the one who slayed the dragon. Yeah, it was a group effort, but I think there should be a greater buff for the sword holder, and then everyone else could kind of get a similar buff. And if, let's say, you were an individual and you happened to slay over the course of 2 years, if that's what it took to kill the Minotaur King, then you would have everyone's attention as you would look different, maybe have a cloak with a certain signa or a color, and then you could start your own guild from that point, and that buff would get distributed to, all your followers and people in your guild. So now you're able to just, I guess, make more money with people who are willing to work for and with you. At that point, that's just a thought.
Treating buffs like a bloodline, that's a pretty interesting concept, right? Where you can trace your bloodline back to the different killings that had happened. As it relates to the Minotaur King or any individual big mob, I like the idea that they have it where it doesn't come back, it doesn't respawn. I think that's novel, and I think that's why I like it so much, because in most games everything does respawn. I think the challenge is, if it's a creature that has a culture and there's multiples, well, maybe you see kind of those grow into the new leader. But when you've got one-offs where it might be like a Minotaur King, who there is no bloodline that can grow back into that position, then it disappears forever, which on one hand I really like, but on the other hand kind of sucks because you miss the opportunity to go after it. As far as the loot is concerned, I think that you're not going to be able to get away from like legendary drops, right? Unless they go to a coin system or a diamond system or a token system where you can buy stuff, and all the tokens get distributed evenly. But there's going to be that Minotaur's axe that drops, and I don't see how you make it fair for everybody who is there. I just don't know if it's possible.
I have one point. So imagine we did talk about earlier how you could become a Minotaur if you slayed it. What if the entire raid party, like the entire guild, for example, became a Minotaur and they were marked? It's like the Minotaur Slayers.
Like PvP,
I really like that idea, Fancy.
It's like one thing they could distribute to the entire party, but it'd be really, really cool. Like a unique race. Yeah. That would be one way to get the full use out of a boss that only dies once. They need to make it epic for everyone involved, really.
Mm-hmm. So when I say contracts can change that, here's kind of what I envision. So let's say that you and your entire guild, you go out on this quest and you get this legendary drop. Well, the contract could be that the guild owns that drop. That way, within your guild, you could say that, whoever is our champion of the month within our guild for the next month, this is your sword. And then it goes back to the guild. So there's some ways you could play that out to where people still are going to feel like, I want to go out and I want to help the guild make this happen because this makes our guild stronger. And based on things happening in the guild, I will still be able to take part and make use of this item.
I think those two in combination would be really great. Like something you can use all the time and something you could occasionally use.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think like you said, Fancy, I think both of those ideas are correct, right? So you have the weapons that drop, you have the skills that drop, and then like you were saying, Fancy, I remember back in Guild Wars 1, I think I ended up bringing up Guild Wars 1 every podcast because that was my first MMO. But anyway, when you reach certain ranks in PvP, you had like an emote that you could do. And it was this really big effect where you shot out like a gold lion out of your chest, or a dragon came up out of the ground up under you and, flew around for a second or something like that. And it was only for the people who had achieved that rank. And so, say you killed a Minotaur King, and you can do an emote where a Minotaur rises up behind you and swings his axe or something like that. And he's this big, titan, glowy thing, and everybody in town can't miss it, and then it just goes away. But it's something that says, this account right here, this is, I did that, the Minotaur King died because I was there, So, and then at the same time, you could have the weapons and the skills that would be, owned by the guild.
Following the model that Jesse gave of the guild ownership, if we all look back into our past histories of raiding as a guild, it would really solve the problem of identifying who should be, main tank, who should be main healers. You've got your person who's already demonstrated the skill. He gets all the gear, the guild gear that's going to put him in the position to be successful. Your main healers, your main support members are going to get the best gear from the guild bank that will help the next fight. I think that's a good way to use that guild ownership model.
Consumables as well. That's
how brilliant is that?
Mm-hmm.
To think like you're going out for a particular raid, your guild has all these assets. You pick the party, and now you get to gear up that party based on the assets that your guild has to position your guild for making this happen. That's freaking awesome.
I think that's a terrific improvement on the old ways. Because as an old World of Warcraft main tank, I remember the tremendous amount of pressure, and it actually caused me some real life problems because when a whole guild, I mean, you got whatever 25, 50 guys that helps you to get a certain tool that they need to pass the next level of the dungeon, and you miss a raid night. You know what I mean? That's a big deal. And I remember how it felt when we didn't have our main healer or our other main tank or whatever show up. I mean, we might scrap the raid that night or have to try to get somebody else to come in. It would have been so much better if the guild actually owned the assets and was able to just say, "Hey, I know you're the secondary main tank, so now you're the main guy. The main guy didn't show tonight, and still be able to progress without there being a hitch."
Yeah, I think the challenge there is what happens when somebody leaves, right? Now, if we know people go in and out of guilds with some frequency, right? And if you've got somebody who's spent a year contributing to the success of the guild, but now they want to move on to doing something else, what are they taking away with them? Are they getting a piece of the guild profits? Is that built into a smart contract? Are they walking away with a share?
Get a pension?
Yeah, like a pension. Yeah, there we go, a pension. I'm retiring. I was your guild champion, and I'm retiring. I want my 1% of all guild earnings. Right? That takes us in a whole different rabbit hole. But it seems like there's a lot of cool opportunities here for us to get into. But it doesn't happen unless the game companies are listening and actually building these ideas into their systems. Right? So these companies that want to have a closed development model and not divulge, or at least not embrace the community, I think are going to have a harder time than some of the other companies who want to build with the community.
That's such an interesting idea of having a severance package, Banjo, that I never would have thought of. Because to me, in my head, automatically, if you leave a guild, that's it. You left the guild, you're done. You're nobody, right? But you know what? I mean, we are talking about real world assets and time and money being put into these things. So maybe you do deserve a severance package because of all the value that you put into the guild during your time there. Go ahead,
Perhaps the guild pays out a portion of the money if they get like a really big guild drop like that to each of the participating members, just to like pay off their little share immediately, just in case of them circumstances.
I think that would have to be a part of the model, just so that you weren't on the hook for trying to do severance or unemployment into the future.
Because surely it would drop a lot of gold, wouldn't it? Like thousands of whatever, mirror or go on.
Mirror coin,
Yeah.
Well, and one of the things that we haven't embraced or talked about as far as getting people to play for you is we may see some sort of governmental regulatory response to this, right? So people aren't taken advantage of. We might see unions form, so they're not taken advantage of. There's going to be a whole dynamic in this idea of employing people, because that's really what you're doing. You can call it whatever you want. You're employing somebody to use your asset and make you money. Is there going to be some regulatory response to that in different countries where the government see an opportunity to get a piece of the pie, right? And that's a very real thing when there's money moving through a system that's untaxed. These governments are going to look for ways to insert themselves into these games.
That's the scariest thing about the current climate to me, Banjo, is, I mean, you and I both know that the only reason the governments aren't involved now is because they move so slowly. They're slugs at the end of the day. But in 4 years' time, maybe 6 years' time, they are coming. And you can't have people in the Philippines making a decent wage all of a sudden without some kind of government body either there or here or somewhere trying to step in. And that's what it worries me, that a lot of these, I mean, I don't see any of these gaming studios that are coming out with these NFT games taking decentralization seriously enough. I mean, Gala with the node owners system and selling the nodes had me thinking that they were heading in that direction, but I'm not so sure that they are taking it seriously enough, because you have a small window I mean, what happened with Ripple? What they get, like 4 years? They got a 4-year grace period before they started getting hit over the head, and that's pretty much standard, right? I mean, same with Tether, same with it's going to come to the NFT space. It just hasn't got there yet. But you got a lot of these studios where people are making a whole lot of money, a lot of new millionaires in NFT gaming all of a sudden, and that's going to get. They're going to look at it.
I think these are the death throes of fiat currencies that we're experiencing, and it'll be over the next decade or so, because essentially the only way they would truly have to control it is the fiat off ramp. So what happens and especially that's less of a concern to developing countries, because there's so many people with mobile devices that don't actually have bank accounts. So what happens? A country says, okay, we're going to regulate the off ramp, and then we're also going to regulate this particular cryptocurrency. Well, great. Now people just get paid in a different one. So these are the death throes, because there's no way to endlessly control this. And I think that's one of the powers of crypto to begin with. But it's going to be an interesting ride.
Well, with the right now, like with Uniswap, right? You got they're getting threatened from the server side, and it's the same thing. Like that's why I like Gala with the servers, because they can decentralize out enough to where hopefully one day they don't control the Gala Games ecosystem anymore. But they can attack you through the servers. They can attack the game studio themselves and say, hey, you're not going to keep producing for this game anymore. And if the players don't have ownership of the game already, they're not going to be able to pivot to a different game studio in a different country to be able to continue to iterate on that game. You know what I mean?
Well, I'm curious if Gala's ownership of their own chain actually creates more risk for them, right? So if you think about something that's built on Solana, this is a very big decentralized network. Anybody can build on it. If somebody builds something that gets attacked from a regulatory compliance perspective, it's just that company that's building on it that's going to get hammered, right? You can't go after Solana. But if you've got Gala building their own network and they're keeping a tight rein on that network, they're kind of responsible and accountable to the things that happen on that network from a regulatory and a tax perspective. So I'm wondering if they aren't creating more risk for themselves by trying to keep this closed ecosystem, or will they decentralize it at some point in the future? And, you can call node holders decentralized ownership, but at the end of the day, we're beholden to Gala. They're the ones developing and building that network.
Yeah, they have to let it go. They have to release it into the wild at some point. There has to be a clear plan to do so. And the only developer that I've seen really talk about that was the Star Atlas CEO, who was talking about kind of releasing it into the wild at a certain point and having a clear track on how he wants to get there. I haven't seen anybody else talking about that, and that worries me.
That goes back to what you said earlier, Banjo, about companies going forth being transparent. I think it was a luxury in the past to kind of keep a wraps on things and build things in a bubble. But I think as we're discovering now, this is such a new frontier that it's going to require open communication with the communities that support these projects.
Yeah, and I shared that on their Discord as well when it comes to play to earn, and Gala positions itself as a play to earn company. And really anybody who's going to go into buying something to play to earn is going to be considering the ROI, right? You're going to look at it either from an investment perspective or maybe a blockchain perspective, where I buy something and I'm looking at what I'm going to get in return for it. Anybody in the play to earn space is going to be looking at what they buy and how they're going to get a return on it, whether it's going to be a year, 2 years. No one's buying. I know what Gala says, but here's what I'm going to say it clearly. No one's buying this stuff just to contribute to an ecosystem. They're buying it with an idea that they're going to make some money down the line. And you got to get over the idea to people that that's an investment. I mean, I get why they can't call nodes an investment, because the SEC is always the monkey on our back. But at the end of the day, every single one of us here that owns a deed bought it with the idea that we're going to get a return on it.
Jesse, can we bring up Sirius 5 at 11:43? You guys doing these things are freely promoting Gala Games. The game developer and director should join your interview to answer some raw questions. We're doing this thing because we love the idea of Mirandus, and we're doing this thing because we love the idea of Gala Games. And also, we're gamers, man. We love NFT gaming in general, and we just want to see we want to see this whole thing take off in a positive way that's gonna be good for the gamers and good for the people as a whole. It's not really about trying to call somebody on the carpet or anything like that. And we respect those guys are doing a whole lot of work. You know what I mean? And they're building the plane as it's flying, and it's a very difficult thing. So, if they don't have the time to get on, they don't have the time to get on. But at the same time, we're here for the community. We're not really here to jump on them. So.
And the truth is, where you're going to see that happen is probably less from our requests and more from you as the community. So,
Absolutely.
share your thoughts about wanting them to come on a show like this.
And just for the sake of everybody listening, they have an open invitation, and there's been some dialogue back and forth between different people to come on. So we're all hopeful that in the near future that somebody will come on and kind of talk about the game, or the ecosystem in general. We sometimes have critical complaints about some of the things that we see, but at the end of the day, we're all gamers. We all love it, and we would love to talk to them about the game and the ecosystem in general.
And
Yeah,
we're
just
still
so
here
I-
supporting the game, so clearly we love
Yeah.
the concept.
Yeah, just so I didn't come off too harsh on that Series 5. Yeah, like Banjo said, we have actually talked to several people from Gala, and they seem open to the idea. Well, some of them seem open to the idea, so it shouldn't be. You might get surprised one day. Just say it like that, What else do we got? Mega, do you have anything else you wanted to comment on before I go to the next topic?
Yeah, as far as the thing I want to comment, just to give you a little bit of background. So I've played games ever since the NES Nintendo days, Super Mario Brothers. So and I've been playing I've been playing games from back then. I'll say for the past 7 years or so, I was pretty much mainly on League of Legends. Now the game is awesome, right? It's a great game. I was really into it, where I would, purchase skins, right? But the thing is, when you pay for skins, you don't own the skins. You're paying the company, right? And I'm fine with that. That's not a complaint. But once I came across Gala Games and Mirandus, and just the whole fact that you can purchase, you can actually own, items, own, NFT of land. That's what piqued my interest to kind of pivot, because it's like a whole new world. Now I don't have really exposure to MMOs as some of you do, where that's new. Like I have a basic understanding, but not like deep, in-depth knowledge. But so like, for example, remember the image where we saw for Mirandus, where you have the first person perspective, where you're looking at the Minotaur King from a first person perspective view, and then you see like the two henchmen. It looks like one is like a warlock and another person has, I think, like mace, right? So when you see that, when I first saw it, I'm thinking, oh, this could be like Ready Player One, where if I finish off this Minotaur King, I'll get for example, the Mirandus stored. But then when we're talking about guilds, and I'm down, to be in a guild, because I just love this community and group. So there's that new shift that I came across over time. Mike, I'll say concern or thought is, with guilds, will there be like a cap to how many people in a party in a guild can actually face something that's on an ancient level, like the Minotaur King? Let's say if the guild has 200 people, but then if there's a cap that, okay, when you're in the vicinity of the Minotaur King, would it be limited to, okay, you can't have more than 5 people fight this ancient level boss? So that's something that comes to mind when I think about that. That's all.
I think in my experience, my most fun raids that I was ever on was when there was no cap. Like you were throwing everything you had at whatever this mob was, and you would watch videos. And I still have videos from the 90s of raids that I was in, or maybe it was early 2000s, where it was just like 50 people going after this one mob. And it's actually a video that's still shared with our social group today, that stays connected from the guild that I was in, because it was just, these experiences and the bonds that are going to be made around the experiences that you go through in the game. And when you can get a whole guild going after one boss, and let me be clear, getting 50 people online at the same time to go after a boss is not an easy thing to do, especially if it's something that's like a random spawn. But at the end of the day, those are the stories that people tell, and those are the stories that people remember. So I really hope it's not capped at like 10 people going after the Minotaur King.
Okay.
Yeah, the
cool.
fact you're going to have to house people, food, potions, whatever else that gives the buff, you're going to have it there wherever it is. It's going to be quite insane. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what you said, Banjo, and then plus just listening to Mike McCarthy, man, I think we have the possibility for some really epic adventures. If you have to say take a couple of days with your guild to travel to a boss and set up a homestead or an outpost or something, so you can feed and clothe everybody and do your respawns and whatnot, or whatever, however that's going to work. You know what I mean? That's
Like
Yeah.
everyone's going to need a good sleep to face the Minotaur King.
Need my
Yeah,
8
what if
hours,
that's the
guys.
thing?
Sorry.
What if that's a thing too? What if, like, because your party's been together, the longer the party is together, you start gaining a buff for camaraderie or something like that? That's pretty
I
cool.
like that idea. Yeah, I love that idea.
So if there's no cap, then maybe the more players in the guild that would face the Minotaur King, maybe it would scale up relative to the amount of players in the guild. So you couldn't just throw numbers of
Right.
players at the objective to defeat it.
I think if you went that route, you'd have to have a floor, though, right? Because you don't want to go in and get the same experience with a 4-man group as you would with 50 people. In my experience, those types of fights are endgame fights, right? It's the top guilds on the server that are really going to be able to attempt those fights and be successful in them.
Right.
And I think that's important because it requires some progress within the guild and some growth in equipment. I think the idea of just zerging, an end game boss with 100 level 1 characters, I just don't see that being something that would work. I think it's going to have to be the best of the best, the people who have put the time and the money into the game.
Yeah, it's also going to be important to have like the historians there in a way to like record it, like live streamers, YouTubers, because if something's going down once, that's going to get a lot of views.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's an interesting thing. It kind of reminds me of like the way that they filmed Ready Player One as the movie. If you have only one Minotaur King, or if you have these one-off events, I would totally watch a show that was a recap of the days or the week's most amazing things that happened within the world of Mirandus. That's a pretty cool concept.
Is there there's a business model and maybe a group of people who will live stream these end game fights with this only one boss, right? So maybe within Mirandus it's the Minotaur King and they have a YouTube channel or something that's dedicated to streaming these end game fights, or maybe with a different IP it's a huge space battle where you get to load into the game as a camera and not a participant, and actually kind of do your own production. Even within Mirandus, that'd be awesome if you had your own in-game camera that was not connected to the game, where you could kind of do a cinematic live stream of these boss fights.
Or maybe the Mirandus Gentry is out there on our mumsins, and we're out there doing the investigative journalist thing, hiding in the bush, watching the other guild, or maybe it's our own guild, watching ourselves take out the big bosses. You know what I mean? And giving a little commentary to the community. Taking comments and questions just like today.
Depending on how it works out, I think it would be quite cocky to like live stream killing the Minotaur King, because you could just get wiped out and then everyone would know where it is and they could just go.
Yeah, I think
they
live
can
stream might
blindfold
not be
us.
the same.
Yeah.
Live
So-
streaming might not be the deal.
Open invitation to any guild that beats Rome to the Minotaur King. I'll live stream it for you for free.
Absolutely. We'll be up there. We'll commentate for you, talk about how amazing you
Right.
We need to get some
Right.
shoutcasters.
And on that point of the Minotaur King not being defeated, and then everyone knowing where it would be, I think it would be pretty cool because everyone might know where it is in the beginning, and there's going to be a trek to get there and then to maybe defeat it. But then if one guild fails, the one who gets there first and it's defeated, or it's rather not defeated, then there's a different location that it spawned. And now there's a new adventure that every guild needs to prepare for again, because it's going to take some time to get to that location.
Yeah, so I know we saw the Minotaur King in his lair, but I personally think it'd be best if he was like just giant and roaming around the countryside, and if you see him, just run, and everybody knows where he is, and you're just keeping out of the way, and you're like just trying to prepare the entire time.
Yeah,
Personally-
you know,
That's one way a homestead could get destroyed.
Well, some of the
I'll-
biggest
I'll-
fun in games is getting out and exploring, and you see this larger than life mob sitting out in the distance, and you make a large path around that mob just to travel. But walking up on something like a huge Minotaur King in the countryside, and knowing that you have to like go down the valley and up through the river and all this stuff just to get around them, that's compelling to me.
Yeah, and
You know,
not
that's.
go ahead.
Go ahead, Ray.
Okay,
Well,
I
I
was,
was going to say that's. Go ahead, buddy.
I was going to say not one person or even a small group of people would be able to defeat the Minotaur King if it was wandering in that way. So it would be pretty fun to just see people get slaughtered and attempt to fight the Minotaur King as you're just wandering, and maybe take photos and publicize it like, hey, where's it going? You know. But then if that's the case, it would be tracked, and then the guild with the most in the beginning would be able to kill it the fastest, and however. So I guess that's the secrecy of where it is in the journey and what you have to do to get there is what's going to keep the excitement going, and then not just any guild coming out of the gate with strong numbers and then the infrastructure and the economy to defeat it first. But I like that idea though.
And he didn't get to be Minotaur King by being so easily tracked and taken down. So the question also becomes: is what is his area of aggro? I mean, you may be able to see him off in the distance, but maybe he smelled you a long way before that.
Yeah.
Who knows?
And I don't want to come up on a Minotaur King with the Bright Sun Elf, running it around the countryside, killing it hit point by hit point, right? I forget, that term, it loses right now. That term, what was that term? Is it ghosting or what is it called when you do that? Kiting.
Kiting.
Yeah, kite the hell out of him. Yeah, Jesse, you brought up an interesting point when you started talking about how he got to be the Minotaur King, right? This is an interesting point of lore. So, are there other Minotaurs, and are there going to be Minotaurs in the way before you even get to the Minotaur King? Maybe there's marauding bands of Minotaurs that are coming from the Minotaur King, and that's why we have to go take care of them or something like that. That's a interesting thing.
Yeah, that'll be
But going back to the conversation about finding these bosses in the wild, man, I don't know how many MMOs, when I was new to MMOs, I don't know how many times when I would walk up on, I'd see these big bosses, right? And when you first see them, you're like, wait a minute, why is this big old drag? Well, maybe I can fight him. And I always went up and got one shot, man. I tried every time. It took me a long time to get it. I would go up there and try to fight him and see if I could take him. And going back to how important death is going to be in Mirandus and stuff like that, that's an interesting thing. When you start talking about maybe taking a hit on your NFT or losing your XP or whatever he's going to do to us.
What kind of boss mobs do you guys think we'll see in Endgame? We can assume that Minotaur is. We might see some dragons. What are some other things that you guys would want to see as an Endgame? Lich.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's always some kind of undead situation, right? So there's got to be some kind of undead horde or something.
If they're doing traditional Dungeons and Dragons, there could be like some epic Eye of the Beholder, a Demigorgon. There could be all kinds of interesting high-level stuff to throw in a lair somewhere.
Yeah, in my opinion, they could even add to the lore. Like they could have other variants of the races you play, but they would be evil in nature. So you could be going against a band of a couple humans and then they have a couple dwarves and orcs and elves and even the other races that would come to fruition later on. That'd be cool, in my opinion.
If Mirandus made a separate shard, and it would require maybe a copy of all the deeds, where they made a PvP shard where they had the races and they had the creature races, I would absolutely buy into that. The idea of being an orc clan or a goblin clan or a hobgoblin clan and raiding the good guys or the avatars, I think that has legs as well.
Oh yeah. In SWOTOR, was that Star Wars: The Old Republic or whatever? I chose the evil side. I chose the path of the dark side. That's always an interesting dynamic. So I think Fancy's interested in that kind of thing too, right, Fancy?
Nah, it's a bit too not my time.
I think it'd be cool if there was an end game boss that was actually like a citadel, right? So instead of it being a creature you go after, you have to coordinate the raid of a citadel with your guild. So you take the gates and then take the next ring, and maybe that you've got the citadel's guard as a next level mob within the citadel, and then maybe you fight the king's champion at the end, and that's the end boss. It's not just going through a dungeon to get to a certain room that has this boss. You actually have to have a progressive fight to get to the boss.
Sevorg at 11:59 brought up a kind of a cool idea there, Bessie. What if there were actual skeletons littered in the entrance of the lair to the Minotaur for players who have been slain by the king? I think that, as far as death mattering and death meaning something, I mean, obviously this could get out of hand if people were kind of crazy about it. But being that I think that he's going to make death count, it would be interesting if there was, skeletons left from all the people who had tried to take out the Minotaur King in the past. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's that. And if you did die deep within a lair, I mean, we've seen different games approach this differently, but even though you resurrect at perhaps a cemetery, do you still got to go and get back to that area to get your gear if it drops there? I mean, like, where does your gear drop in death? If death is a serious thing, maybe that's one of the aspects of it. It's like you either lose it or some of your gear, but if it's on chain, maybe it just sits there on chain. You can't use it in Mirandus. You still own it, but it's in the dungeon somewhere and you got to go and get it.
That's a great point.
Embarrassing amount of hours trying to get my body back in different games. I'm not going
to Me too. And have lost, almost a year's worth of work, well, maybe about 8 months worth of work to a loss of a body in a dungeon that I couldn't get back to. So that piece I don't like. But Jesse, you bring up a good point. It has to live on the blockchain, so it's probably persistent to some degree. So maybe it doesn't disappear, but it's always at the bottom of the well, so to speak, until you get down to the bottom of the well again.
Because that is true. That's how the NFTs can work. Because even though you own them and they're in your wallet, what they do in game is fully dictated by the developers. So you can own this thing, but it cannot have function until this certain requirement is met.
Mm-hmm.
Right on. Anybody else got anything to comment there? So we're right about the 2-hour mark. How you guys feeling? You guys want to do some closing statements, or you guys want to try to do one more, or where we at?
Or does Mega have a question he wants to ask all of us that may not have been in the list? Is there anything else you got, Mega?
Yeah, surprise us, Mega. You got to.
There's still a couple other items in the list, which is fine. Just one thing that it's one of the list items where, like, for the shops, right? If there are going to be hundreds of thousands or millions of people playing the game, and a person has a shop, like let's say, for example, a large weapon shop or a majestic weapon shop, what's the opinion of, should they start at a value of 0, or there'd be a default amount, like when you play RPG, I know, when you're interacting with the shop, you just see standard items, which would be just the actual game weapon, but then the special crafted ones that you would then post for sale would be the single items that you would display in your shop. So, like, just to be able to handle that high amount of players that'll be playing the game, I'm thinking that I'll say higher tier shops should have a general stock of certain base weapons, and then if they sell out, then get replenished. But then I'll say the legendary or ancient tier style weapons that you have to get the materials and craft, or if you slay a specific enemy to get the drop, then you would put that up for sale.
Seems to me you have to have both. You have to have the ability to sell stuff that's crafted and stuff that you would get in world. Now, whether the cases that you have to display that stuff, maybe it needs to be upgraded a certain way. But it seems to me pretty clear that they're building both a crafted environment and an adventure environment. I think the difference will be which one has more value. I think we've all played games where the crafted weapons have more in-game benefit, and then we've played other games where the stuff that drops from mob bosses has better benefit.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Which is going to be more powerful? I've seen it done both ways, and obviously the ones where the crafted weapons were the superior, those were the more play to win type of games. Gala being play to earn and having a play to win background might lean in that direction. But I feel like if you equalized it a bit, that might be a little bit better because I tend to personally like for the adventurers to have a lot more kind of clout and power in the game environment. Then I mean, and this is coming from a person who actually plans to probably spend most of my time running a shop or being a crafter or something like that. And, adventuring more in real life than I am in the game. But I still kind of would like to see a game where the adventurers were, had that little bit of extra.
I'd like the idea, and especially because now we're venturing into the place where, because it's on chain, we have an entire record of its history. I like the idea that if you craft a weapon, that's great. It's a great weapon, but that weapon can only be named once it's actually performed an amazing deed. Something like that would be pretty cool.
Oh, I like that.
That's an interesting idea. I like that.
You know, Timmy Berry brought up an interesting question in chat around death. I know I'm jumping back a little bit here, but I think he's thinking about how to make money using his assets, and he wants to put his buildings around cemeteries. So as people, rebirth into a cemetery, they can refit at his little outpost with all his repairs and potions and food. It's good thinking, Timmy.
Timmy Berry, I like the way you think, buddy. You might want to go and find that Rome Discord. Maybe try to jump in there. I like the way you're thinking there.
We think the same way.
Yeah, I like that. So we got from the chat, they were asking for like 4 more topics, please. So if you got some more, Mega, that you wanna pop up,
Sure. And just the final piece for the last topic is like, I don't have that, but let's say if I was a person who purchased a Majestic weapon shop, I'm looking right now, it's showing like 11 ETH for a Majestic weapon shop. Fine, but as far as do I start with 0, like literally nothing, and then I have to now start from scratch to then, get weapons? But the thing about the Majestic, say for example, the Majestic weapon shop, it says the 5 great kings come here to equip their imperial guard. Nothing more needs to be said. And if we know like these ancient shops, if there are only 5, that means there should be 1 in each citadel kingdom. So I'm thinking, for someone to acquire that, they would at least be stocked with some type of default level of high quality items off the bat, just off the jump, because it would be pretty bad to me if you just start from nothing. Like, you have this Majestic shop, but then it's like barren, and then you have to work from scratch to stock like 1 item, but who knows how long it would take to get 1 item when you have millions of potentially millions of players playing the game. So that's, I'm thinking it should be a hybrid where you get a default stock of high quality weapons, but then you can go out and venture or have ways to craft the special or legendary ancient type weapons to put on display.
You
It's an
make
interesting
an point
idea.
there. You make an interesting point, MegaRaidBoss, because I hadn't thought of that, but yeah, I mean, if you've already ponied up the money to say have a potion shop, and now you got to pony up the money to get people to help you find the herbs or whatever to make your first potions. I mean, that's a bit of a drag, and it definitely will slow down the initial player economy a bit. The launch will be a little bit slower just because of that aspect. That's interesting. I'm sorry, Banjo, go ahead.
No, I think we're all along the same lines there, man. So as I see it, yeah, you're right. It has to open up something you should be able to sell right away. Now, whether that's done through completed items or that's done through, easy to complete blueprints, maybe. But I think if you're going to open up that type of property, there's going to be some things you have to go out into the world to procure, right? If you want to sell the best sword that needs a certain gem from a certain mine, I don't see making it easy street just by opening up the shop that gives you that. I think you really have to go out into the world and gather the high-end resources to build those weapons. However, I do think there should be an opportunity for you to say, take the best sword from the next forge down and somehow instantly make it better through something within your shop, right? So you can level up items from lesser buildings and maybe use that as your foundational base for selling a product, something that's higher end.
That's the interesting thing. So you're saying like maybe you'd be able to go like say grab something from a lesser shop or a couple items from a lesser shop, make it from their shop, upgrade it, and resell it at that higher deal.
Improve the enchantment, something. I mean, that allows you to buy stuff that's already completed and roll it right into a new product. I think that what a lot of things, well, I think one thing that people haven't talked about and we haven't talked about yet is people who buy these high-end buildings, it's going to take a while to get them going, right? Because you got to get the foundational game going first and the lesser components. And I'm curious how long it's going to take before a Majestic weapon shop can really start putting out Majestic weapons because of all the stuff that needs to happen underneath it first.
Right. For example, even mining a specific type of ore that's hard to find. And there's no one in the land that even has the mining skills or the ability to find this stuff in the regions where it can be found. Yeah. So therefore, I mean, I've heard people talk about this, and I think it makes a lot of sense. In the very early stages, you may not need more than what you could do in a 5x5 stand just because you don't need the high-end stuff yet. And so hopefully that's something that progresses over time. But in the very beginning, I don't see a whole lot of need for it. And especially if we're talking about all things being on chain, then if that's the case, then, or at least most of the stuff they can, then those things should go through a crafting process. I don't necessarily like the idea of just having this inventory that just shows up. I think that the person should have to go and get the ore and the coal and the stoke the fire and have the skills and have some of the stuff they craft fail and learn that process. I think that in the very beginning, it's going to be all about the people that put in that time and effort to make the world what it should be.
Yeah, a lot of games you can't even gather certain quality of items without having a certain quality level of tool, right? So you might not be able to get the herb for the high-end potion if you don't have the right kind of sickle or whatever. You might not be able to get the right ore, like you were mentioning, out of that mine if you don't have the right kind of pick or whatever. So then that would obviously make it so that you had a chain where, you wouldn't be able to get the quality of goods to the Majestic shop yet until the lower shops are already rolling, That's an interesting concept.
So Monty Burns made a good point in the chat. It's about reverse engineering things you pick up in the world. That could be quite a good way to introduce like basic crafting recipes.
I saw that. That was a good comment.
Yeah.
It seems to me that there's going to be some type of level lock involved, right? So there's probably going to be a level lock based on the skill of the crafter. Obviously, the building is a kind of a form of a level lock between the quality of items. But in many games that we've played, we know that some resources are level locked as well. So you can't get this certain resource until you're level 50 and can actually get into that dungeon and survive to harvest it. So there's going to be a lot of different gates to completing some of these products that are going to create natural barriers in the game. Again, furthering my concern that these people who are buying the high-end crafting, they're not going to be able to really benefit until the game's fleshed out.
All right, that's all interesting ideas. Go ahead, Mega. Yeah, jump.
Oh, and then just the next topic. Well, just it's a question that floats. Say, for example, in the inn owner mechanic. My thoughts are like, okay, if you use an inn to have people sleep, then I'm thinking if a person has an inn, then they technically would be able to also just sleep there as a quote unquote a mobile homestead.
Yeah, that definitely is an interesting question. Like, what is the difference between a 10x10 camp that can house 4 people and a 10x10 inn?
Yeah, those are questions. Those are questions that I think really, I don't know what the obviously there must be some kind of hold up on their side as far as the information they're able to give us on that kind of stuff. But the camps and the tents have been a question for me this entire time. Like, I mean, obviously it's not that big a deal to snatch up a tent or a camp for most people in Western countries, but I mean, why? Why would we do that? Why would, I don't understand why to buy one. I have nothing to go on there.
It seems to me the quality of the rest, like if the buff that you get at the day's end or when you wake up, would be better at the quality of the establishment. So maybe at a tent you get a baseline. Okay, I'm up, but maybe if you stay at a Majestic Inn, you get a plus 10 or a minus 50% energy reduction throughout the day. So I think it's more. as I see it, it's probably going to be more about the quality of the buff after you wake up versus, where you stay.
And maybe the difference between a tent, and a camp is that those give you the same quality, but a tent can hold maybe 1 or 2 people. A camp maybe, got bunks, maybe like 8. And so if you're a tent owner, you can kind of share that with a party. I'm just spitballing, but those are maybe some of the possibilities.
Well, I think breeding quality works best in majestic inns versus tents.
That it does.
Taking it back to all those half orcs and half elves running around out there. What else you got for us, Megan?
If anybody recall seeing anything about the beta where there would be like a people of the node, was that actually a thing that anyone else has seen? I thought I read that somewhere. I was trying to I would have documented if I'd really paid attention to that, but just wondering, like, because you know how like when the beta comes out, from what I understand, it'll start with like Citadel owners followed by town owners, but then further down the line, I thought there was something about a people of the node.
Well, there's node owners, so there's some of us own nodes that help for the Gala ecosystem, basically.
What they were leaning towards, in that lore, is that is the way that people will be able to enter the world. But I think they're also potentially going to tie in some special type of NFT, maybe an avatar that is node owner specific, is kind of what my take on that was.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, I remember that just being the order that people were going to be allowed into the game, so they basically were kind of basing it off of, obviously you need the deed owners in there first so they can place their deeds. And then, I don't even remember the order. I think you just had it. You just gave it out to us, Megan. But the node people would be, because I remember looking at that and realizing I was going to be like last as a node owner or something like that. Right before last.
Right, and then another item I have is people's opinions on what could be the pros and cons to the Mirandus economy with the advent of the grand sanctuaries. Like we're discussing scholarships, but then there'll be the grand sanctuaries to give new players a way to start out in the world of Mirandus. Just how that could affect the dynamics of just the entire ecosystem of Mirandus.
I feel like if they do the sanctuaries right, it'll be a good backup plan. I think that maybe, depending on the players to create the quests and create the interactivity for the new players to come in might be kind of a high bar in such a new kind of a ecosystem. And maybe the sanctuaries will be a good backup plan for that, a very basic way to get people into the game for free where they can come in and enjoy things. And then the issue I see is that they need to make sure that they allow room for the players, the deed owners, the guild teams and stuff like that to be able to come in on top of those sanctuaries and provide a better option and a better experience for new players beyond the basic level of what the sanctuaries can provide. And I think if they do that, that'll create a better, more dynamic game. Because realistically, you kind of want the players to kind of be able to take that over at some point, I would think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wanted to just make a point on the sanctuaries. We talked about scholarships, but I think if they're going to go the sanctuary route, which seems to be legit and 100% going to, it's going to happen, then maybe scholarships is not what they ever wanted, and this is their idea of what scholarshiping would be, where they're in control of that with these, well, not necessarily in control, but whoever bought these would be the people who would help onboard people coming in just with nothing into a sanctuary. But I feel like they should allow both. I guess sanctuaries would be the most amount they could handle the most as far as people coming in not having anything, whether it's food, and they'll have like a little care package and a basic armor. But I would like if the guilds would be able to do that too, so they could be sub sanctuaries in a sense for people that they're onboarding through just their own guild. But if the only route you can take is go through a sanctuary, if not buying an NFT that's a basic character, and you're literally coming in naked with nothing, then I guess your option other than a guild would be a sanctuary, and then from that point on, I guess you network your way up into a guild.
I think the pros, it allows an on-ramp for a new player to kind of figure out the game in a relatively safe way.
Right.
I think it also allows guilds to have a centralized recruiting point, right? These people don't just show up in weird places in the game. We know they're going to be working out of these sanctuaries, so there's an opportunity to draw new guild members from that population. The con is really on Gala, and that is for them to figure out how to make it compelling for a free-to-play player to jump right into, microtransactions or subscriptions of some sort, to move them from free-to-play into spending something to help drive the economy, because we know, we've discussed previously about if it's just deed owners and building owners passing money back and forth, we're really just, I say, stroking each other off. So you need a way to get these people into the game quickly, make it compelling, make it fun, and get them to start spending money.
That's what's kind of interesting to me about the Axie economic model, right? Is that I was also very worried about that in Mirandus until I saw what Axie's doing, and Axie shows that there's another way to create strong economic principles without the new people coming into the game having to also provide funds. Basically, they don't have to come in with their purse necessarily. They can come in and just provide the effort. So I think as long as they are able to figure out a way to keep new players coming in, whether they come in with their purses or they come in to essentially take money out of the ecosystem, which is what's happening in Axie, that's working just fine, over there. Mm-hmm. So I think, that comes down to people smarter than me, that are really good with, I'm decent with economics, but you gotta be pretty good to be able to figure these systems out. And that's what, like talking about Star Atlas again, they were talking about hiring a bunch of economists to work on their team. That's kind of the level we're at nowadays with these games, is you basically got to be an economist in order to make a functional NFT game. And that's one of the things that Axie had going for them, was a lot of those guys were OG crypto guys already, so they just rolled right into it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see the capacity of the grand sanctuaries. Like, okay, we can only house so many people in the grand sanctuary, and then everybody else would be locked out just from it being at full capacity. If there's that realism aspect to it. So just interesting to see what happens with that. That's pretty much I have for that. There, I'm done.
So Ray, I know you're laughing at AS's comment in the comments there.
Well,
we're going there. Huh? All right.
You do not have to confirm or deny, my friend. You just be you.
But I don't, to be honest. High off of AXS on that and that price that it's at. But other than that,
high on life, man. High on life. Yeah.
Exactly. Good.
Having a good time every day.
There you go.
Bonafide, we're at 2:23. Are we doing more questions? Are you going to close us out?
Yeah, let's go ahead and anybody got some closing statements or anything like that, or are we everybody's all good? Where you guys at? Fancy, Mega, Ray, Banjo.
Well, I'm pretty positive in the long run of what could potentially be Mirandus and how we all talk about and hear from the team it becoming. If some of us might have to get high in the meantime to deal with all the stuff and the development process, but hey, if you smoke, it'll help you along the way with all the stress that's going to follow with development
and your glaucoma.
Yeah, right. but yeah, I'm just like we talked about earlier, it's open door policy here with whoever wants to come on from other guilds or the team themselves. It's a non-judgment free zone here. We don't discriminate. We are somewhat knowledgeable from our experiences in playing, but not maybe on the economic side or development side of games. But we would love to learn more, and if there's any insight that could be shared with us and the community, that's always welcomed.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks to MegaRaidBoss for joining us. It's always great to have some other perspectives on.
Good job.
I think we got some other people already lined up for some future podcasts, which I think will be exciting. Some people from other guilds. We just love to talk about the game, and we love inviting people to join us in chat. And also, if you're interested in connecting with us out of the podcast, you can go to our Discord for the Rome Guild within Mirandus. We have a lot of people who just show up there in our chat to talk about the game. No obligation to join the guild. Just hang out. Let us get to know you. That's how some people get invited right up onto this podcast. So open invitation to anybody who wants to continue the dialogue with us on Discord.
You got anything fancy before we have MegaRaidBoss close us out?
No, that was well played, guys.
Well played. What do you? Well, go ahead and take the floor, Mega. You can do your closing comments, and then that'll be it, man. We appreciate everybody for showing up, and we'll see you guys all next Sunday. But let's finish with MegaRaidBoss.
Yeah, I don't really have much else to say, but just I want to say thank you to everyone for, just allowing me to be part of the discussion. It's pretty exciting to, for our group to be so open to allow individuals to join in, because I was totally surprised, and I'm really excited to now be a citizen of Rome too. So that's great there. So I'm just going to look further into what information we have, and then communicate that with you all. So yeah, thank you for your time and having me participate.
Glad to have you.
All right, everybody. Thank you all. That is it. Thank you for watching the Mirandus Gentry. We'll see you next week.
Rome on 3. 1, 2, 3,
All
Rome.
right.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.
And that is it.